Imagine you are standing on a windswept plateau in Central Asia thousands of years ago. The sun is dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dry earth. You notice a small group gathered around a stone brazier. A thick, sweet smoke curls into the cooling air. You lean in and breathe deeply. This is not just a plant to these people. It is medicine, a source of fiber, and a bridge to the spirit world. For millennia, humans have cultivated this versatile herb, moving it along ancient trade routes from the Altai Mountains to the bustling markets of the Mediterranean. As you settle into the soft grass, the weight of history feels heavy and comforting. Let us travel back to the dawn of this relationship and discover how a simple green leaf changed human civilization while you drift toward sleep. You are standing in the middle of a vast and golden sea of grass. There are no trees to break the horizon, and the sky above you is so wide and so deep that it feels as though it might swallow the earth whole. This is the Central Asian steppe 12,000 years ago. The air is thin and crisp, carrying the scent of dry earth, distant rain, and something else, something herbal and pungent that clings to the hem of your leather tunic as you walk. To your left, the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the Altai Mountains pierce the clouds, acting as a giant wall that separates the frozen north from the lush valleys of the south. You are at the crossroads of the ancient world, a place where the wind never truly stops blowing. The world is changing. The great glaciers of the last ice age have retreated, leaving behind a scarred landscape that is slowly being reclaimed by life. As the ice melted, it carved out deep river valleys and left behind deposits of rich, silty soil. In these pockets of disturbed earth, a specific kind of pioneer plant has begun to flourish. It is hardy, resilient, and incredibly opportunistic. This is the wild ancestor of the cannabis plant. It does not look like the manicured, bright green varieties you might see today. It is a rugged, scrubby weed with serrated leaves and a thick, fibrous stalk, standing tall against the elements. It grows in the wake of human activity, thriving in the nitrogen-rich soil near the places where you and your kin set up camp. It is a camp follower, a silent companion that has hitched its destiny to the footsteps of humanity. Take a moment to look closely at this plant as it sways in the wind. You reach out and brush your hand against the underside of the leaves. They are sticky to the touch. This stickiness comes from thousands of tiny crystalline structures called trichomes. To the plant, these are a defense mechanism, a way to protect itself from the intense ultraviolet radiation of the high-altitude sun and to ward off hungry insects. But to you, as you rub your fingers together, the resin releases a complex aroma. It is earthy, like the smell of the forest floor after a storm, with notes of pine, citrus, and a sharp, musky undertone. This resin is the concentrated essence of the plant, a chemical shield that will one day change the course of human history. You are part of a small band of nomadic hunter-gatherers. Your life is defined by movement. You follow the migrations of the deer and the wild horses, and you gather what the earth provides in its own time. For your people, this plant is not a drug or a sacred herb yet. It is a resource. You have learned that the long, tough stalks can be broken down. By soaking them in the slow-moving water of a nearby stream and then beating them against a flat stone, you can strip away the outer bark to reveal long, incredibly strong fibers. You sit by the fire in the evening, the orange light dancing across your face, and you twist these fibers together. Between your palms, they become cordage. They become the rope you use to tie down your shelters, the thread you use to sew your clothing, and the nets you cast into the rivers to catch fish. The plant is the very fabric of your survival. As you work, you notice the seeds. They are small, mottled, and hard, contained within the flowering tops of the female plants. They are rich in oil and protein. When the hunting is lean and the winter wind begins to bite, these seeds provide a vital source of energy. You crush them between two flat rocks, making a coarse meal that tastes of nuts and earth. There is a deep, quiet satisfaction in knowing that this plant, which grows so freely in the disturbed earth of your campsites, can feed you, clothe you, and hold your world together. But there is another side to this relationship, one that is discovered not through industry, but through the simple warmth of the fire. Imagine the sun is setting behind the Altai Mountains, casting long, purple shadows across the grass. The air grows cold, and you huddle closer to the central hearth of your camp. You have gathered a pile of dried brush and old, withered stalks to keep the flames alive. Among the fuel are the resinous tops of the cannabis plants that were gathered earlier in the day. As the fire consumes them, a thick, white smoke begins to curl upward, trapped beneath the heavy skins of your shelter. You breathe in. The smoke is heavy and fragrant. At first, you might not notice anything other than the warmth in your lungs. But slowly, the world begins to shift. The tension in your shoulders from a long day of walking begins to melt away. The crackle of the fire sounds more rhythmic, more intentional. The faces of your kin, illuminated by the flickering light, seem more vivid, their stories more profound. There is a sense of shared peace, a quiet loosening of the mind that allows the vastness of the steppe to feel less like a void and more like a home. This is the first inkling of the plant's psychoactive power. It is an accidental discovery, a gift from the flames that offers a temporary bridge between the physical world and the world of dreams. This connection between the plant and the people of the steppe would only deepen as the millennia passed. The nomads of Central Asia were the great connectors of the ancient world. They did not build cities of stone or monuments of marble, but they mastered the horse and the wheel. As they moved, they carried the seeds of the cannabis plant with them, spread in the grain pouches of their saddles and the digestive tracts of their livestock. The plant followed the trade routes, moving east toward the yellow silt of the Yangtze River in China and west toward the rolling hills of Europe. You see, the history of this plant is not just a history of consumption, but a history of migration. The people you belong to, the early inhabitants of the Eurasian heartland, were among the first to domesticate the horse. This changed everything. Suddenly, the vast distances of the steppe were no longer an obstacle. You could travel hundreds of miles in a season. You encountered other groups, traded skins and stones, and shared the secrets of the green plant with the serrated leaves. You showed them how to make the strong rope and how the seeds could sustain them through a blizzard. And perhaps, during a shared meal by a fire, you showed them the smoke. By the time the first great civilizations were rising in Mesopotamia and Egypt, the people of the steppe had already been living with cannabis for thousands of years. It was an old friend. To the people of the high plains, the plant was a symbol of the wild, untamed spirit of the landscape. It was a plant that required no cultivation, no plows, and no irrigation. It grew where it pleased, a hardy survivor just like the nomads themselves. Think about the sheer endurance of this species. It has survived ice ages, droughts, and the rise and fall of countless empires. It evolved to be tough, to be sticky, and to be useful. As you sit there on the grass, feeling the wind of the steppe on your skin, you realize that you are at the very beginning of a long, tangled story. The rope in your hands will eventually become the sails of ships that cross oceans. The seeds will become a staple food for millions. And the resin, that sticky, fragrant defense mechanism, will become a key that unlocks the mysteries of the human mind for priests, poets, and doctors throughout the ages. The sun has finally disappeared, leaving a faint glow of orange on the horizon. The stars are beginning to pierce the darkness, more stars than you can count, stretching from one end of the world to the other. You lie back on the earth, the dry grass cushioning your head. The smell of the smoke still lingers in your hair. The steppe is silent, save for the whisper of the wind through the wild seeds. You are at peace, anchored to the earth by the fibers of a plant and connected to the stars by the drift of its smoke. This is the dawn of the relationship, a quiet pact made in the wilderness between a wandering people and a wandering weed. And as the night deepens, you drift into a dreamless sleep, knowing that when you wake, the plant will still be there, waiting in the disturbed earth for the next step of the journey. The air around you begins to change. The cool, dry breeze of the Central Asian steppe softens, replaced by a thick, humid warmth that carries the scent of damp earth, river silt, and wood smoke. You open your eyes and find yourself standing on a gentle slope overlooking a valley in ancient China. Roughly 5,000 years ago, the year is approximately 2700 before the Common Era. Below you, the landscape is a tapestry of vibrant greens. The yellow river winds like a golden dragon through the valley floor, its waters heavy with the fertile soil that gives the region its name. You look down at your feet. You are wearing sandals woven from tough, fibrous stalks, and a simple tunic made of a coarse, durable fabric. This is your first direct encounter with the plant in this new era. It is not just growing wild in the disturbed earth anymore. It is everywhere. It is in the clothes you wear, the fishing nets drying by the riverbank, and the very paper that will one day record the history of this land. But today you are here for a different reason. You are here to meet a legend. You begin to walk down the hillside, your footsteps silent on the mossy ground. As you descend, the mist begins to thin, revealing a figure sitting near the edge of a small clearing. This is Shenong, the divine farmer. In the stories told for millennia, he is a man with a transparent stomach, allowing him to see exactly how different plants affect his body as he consumes them. While he may be a mythic figure, he represents a very real turning point in human history, the moment when we stopped simply gathering what the earth provided and began to systematically study, categorize, and cultivate the botanical world. You approach him slowly. He does not look up, but you can see his hands moving with practiced grace. He is sorting through a basket of roots, leaves, and flowers. Beside him, a small ceramic pot sits over a low fire, the water inside beginning to bubble and release a fragrant steam. Among the herbs piled on the ground, you recognize the familiar serrated leaves of the plant you have been following. Here it is known as ma. In this ancient world, the word ma is a pillar of civilization. It is a word that carries the weight of survival and the lightness of spirit. Shenong reaches out and picks up a bundle of the dried flowering tops of the plant. You watch as he crumbles them into the boiling water. He is not just looking for a way to pass the time. He is a scientist of the ancient world, searching for a cure for the ailments that plague his people. You sit across from him, and though no words are spoken, you feel the depth of his concentration. He believes that every plant has a spirit and a purpose. He categorizes them into 3 grades. The superior herbs are those that nourish life and are non-toxic, even when taken in large quantities over a long time. The middle herbs are those that have some medicinal properties but must be used with care. The inferior herbs are those that are potent and potentially toxic, used only to treat specific acute illnesses. Where does ma fit into this ancient system? For Shenong, it is a plant of dual nature. You watch as he sips the tea he has brewed. In his classic pharmacopoeia, the Shenong Ben Chao Jing, which will be compiled by his followers long after his time, the plant is described as a seeker of balance. He notes that the seeds, when eaten, provide strength and longevity. But it is the flowers and the resin that hold the mystery. He writes that if taken in excess, it can make one see ghosts and walk frantically, but if taken over a long period, it allows one to communicate with the spirits and lightens the body. You feel the stillness of the afternoon. The only sounds are the crackling of the fire and the distant call of a crane from the river. You realize that for the people of this valley, there is no sharp line between the physical and the spiritual. To heal the body is to heal the spirit, and Ma is a bridge between the two. It is used to treat everything from gout and rheumatism to malaria and simple forgetfulness. You stand up and walk toward the edge of the clearing, looking out over the village below. You see women standing in the shallow water of the river, beating long stalks of hemp against the rocks. This is the industrial side of the plant. They are breaking away the woody core to reveal the long, strong fibers inside. These fibers will be spun into thread, woven into cloth, and twisted into ropes. You see a group of men pulling a heavy net from the water, the mesh made entirely of hemp, glistening with the silver scales of fish. The plant is the foundation of their economy. It provides the strength needed to haul water, the warmth needed to survive the winter, and the means to catch food. It is so central to their lives that the ancient Chinese character for Ma depicts two plants hanging inside a drying shed. It is a symbol of home and industry, but as you wander through the village, you notice another use for the plant. Outside a small, thatched hut, an elder sits with a group of children. He is pressing the small, oil-rich seeds of the hemp plant into a paste. These seeds are one of the 5 major grains of ancient China, a staple food that keeps the population fed when the rice or millet crops fail. You smell the nutty, earthy aroma of the seeds being toasted over an open flame. It is a smell of security and sustenance. As the sun begins to set, casting long, purple shadows across the valley, you feel a shift in the atmosphere. The work of the day is done, and the village prepares for the evening. You see a shaman, dressed in robes adorned with symbols of the sun and moon, preparing a small brazier. He is not using the fibers for cloth or the seeds for food. He is using the resinous flowers. You follow him as he enters a circular wooden structure. Inside, the air is cool and smells of cedar. He places the dried herbs onto the glowing coals. You watch as a thick, sweet smoke begins to fill the room. This is the more hidden history of the plant in ancient China. While it was a common medicine and a vital fiber, it also held a place in the sacred rituals of the Taoist seekers. You sit in the corner of the room, invisible but present. The shaman breathes in the smoke, his eyes closing as he begins a low, rhythmic chant. To him, the plant is a tool for liberation. It is a way to thin the veil between the mundane world and the world of the ancestors. In the Taoist tradition, the goal is to achieve harmony with the Tao, the underlying flow of the universe. The plant is seen as a way to quiet the chatter of the mind and allow the spirit to soar. You notice that the shaman uses the plant with a sense of profound respect and caution. It is not a recreational pastime, but a disciplined practice. They call it the liberator of sin, a substance that can help one let go of the attachments and desires that cause suffering. As the smoke curls around the rafters, you feel a sense of profound peace. The world outside, with its taxes and wars and labor, seems to fade away. You realize that the ancient Chinese understood something about this plant that we often forget. They saw it as a whole. They did not separate the rope from the medicine or the food from the vision. It was a gift from the earth that touched every aspect of their existence. It was in the paper they used to write their first laws and the shrouds they used to bury their dead. The fire in the brazier begins to die down to a dull red glow. The shaman remains still, his breath slow and even. You quietly exit the structure and find yourself back under the vast, starlit sky of the Chinese countryside. The air is crisp now, and the sound of the river is a constant, soothing murmur. You think about Shinnong and his transparent stomach, his endless quest to understand the natural world. You think about the weavers by the river and the farmers in the fields. For thousands of years, this relationship remained unchanged. The plant was a constant companion, a silent witness to the rise and fall of dynasties. It traveled along the Silk Road, its seeds carried in the pockets of merchants and its fibers protecting the goods they traded. You walk back toward the hillside where you first arrived. The mist is returning, swirling around your ankles like a white sea. You look back one last time at the valley. You see the faint lights of the village fires, small sparks of human life in the immense darkness of the ancient world. You feel a deep connection to these people, separated by 5 millennia but linked by a single versatile plant. The humid warmth of the valley begins to fade as you climb higher into the mist. The scents of wood smoke and hemp oil linger in your nostrils for a moment longer before being swept away by the cool air of the mountain. You are leaving the world of Shinnong behind, but the knowledge he gathered and the traditions he started will continue to grow and spread, following the river of time toward the west and the south. You find a soft spot on the grass and lie down, looking up at the stars. The same stars that Shinnong looked at, the same stars that guided the first gatherers across the plains. You feel the weight of your hemp tunic against your skin, a reminder of the practical, grounding nature of the plant. As your eyes grow heavy, you know that your journey through the history of this herb is only beginning. There are more cultures to visit, more secrets to uncover, and more ways that this simple weed has shaped the story of humanity. The mist thickens, wrapping you in a soft, white blanket. The sounds of the ancient Chinese valley grow faint and then disappear entirely. You are drifting now, floating on the currents of time, ready to see where the wind and the seeds will take you next. The plant is there, always there, rooted in the earth and reaching for the sky, waiting for the next chapter to be told. You close your eyes, and in the silence of the night, you prepare to move forward, deeper into the long and winding story of the world. Imagine you are standing on the edge of a world that has no borders. Below your feet, the earth is a carpet of hardy grasses, stretching toward a horizon that never seems to end. The air is thin and crisp, carrying the scent of wild thyme and the distant metallic tang of coming snow. This is the Eurasian steppe, a vast ocean of land that connects the far reaches of the east to the rugged borders of the west. You are in the 5th century before the Common Era, a time when the world was vast and full of shadows, and the maps in men's minds were filled with monsters and myths. You feel a rhythmic thrumming under your boots. It is not an earthquake, but the synchronized drumming of thousands of hooves. From the shimmering heat haze of the afternoon, a group of riders appears. They are the Scythians. You see them clearly now, horsemen who seem to be one with their mounts. They are dressed in heavy tunics and trousers of patterned wool and soft leather, their bodies decorated with intricate tattoos of stags and griffins that wind around their limbs like living ink. They carry composite bows and short swords, but they are not here to fight you. You are a ghost in their time, a silent observer of a ritual that has remained unchanged for generations. To understand what happens next, you must look through the eyes of a man who lived long ago. His name was Herodotus, a Greek traveler and chronicler who would one day be known as the father of history. Herodotus was a man of insatiable curiosity. He wandered the known world, from the temples of Egypt to the dusty roads of Persia, collecting stories like a merchant collects fine silks. He heard whispers of the Scythians, these wild nomads of the north who lived in wagons and drank the milk of mares. He was fascinated by their customs, but one particular practice caught his attention and remained etched in the pages of his great work. You follow the riders as they arrive at a small encampment. The sun is beginning to dip, casting long, purple shadows across the grass. In the center of the camp, there is a sense of solemnity. A great leader has passed away, and the tribe is in mourning. But among the Scythians, mourning is not just a time for tears. It is a time for purification, for a cleansing of the spirit and the body. You watch as they begin to construct a strange, small structure. They take 3 long wooden poles, leaning them against one another to form a tripod. Over this frame, they stretch heavy woolen felts, pulling them tight until the interior is sealed away from the cold evening air. Inside this small, dark tent, a metal tripod stands over a collection of stones. These stones have been sitting in a roaring fire outside, and they glow with an intense, internal heat, shimmering like fallen stars. One of the Scythians uses a pair of tongs to carry the red-hot stones into the tent, placing them carefully into the metal dish. The air inside the small enclosure begins to ripple with heat. Now look closely at what the Scythians carry in their hands. They have small pouches filled with seeds. These are not just any seeds. They are the seeds of the hemp plant, a tall, green herb that grows wild across the plains. To the Greeks, this plant was known as cannabis. Herodotus noted that while the Greeks used the stalks of this plant to weave fine linen, the Scythians had discovered another use for it. You step inside the tent with them, though you remain invisible to their eyes. The space is cramped and warm. The smell of the hot wool and the dry earth is overwhelming. One of the men reaches into his pouch and takes a handful of the hemp seeds. He leans over the glowing stones and scatters the seeds across the burning surface. Immediately, there is a sound like a soft, collective sigh as the seeds hit the heat. A thick, white smoke begins to billow upward. It is not the acrid, biting smoke of a wood fire. It is dense and fragrant, smelling of toasted nuts and resin and the deep, green soul of the earth. The smoke fills the small space rapidly, swirling around the men as they sit in a circle. They lean forward, breathing in the vapor. Herodotus described this moment with a sense of wonder. He wrote that the Scythians, as they inhaled the steam, would begin to shout with joy. You see it now. The tension of the funeral, the weight of their grief, seems to lift. Their faces, weathered by the wind of the steppe, begin to soften. They are not merely washing their bodies with water, for Herodotus noted that the Scythians rarely used water to bathe. Instead, this was their bath. They were washing their minds and their spirits in the steam of the hemp. As you sit in the corner of this imaginary tent, you realize that you are witnessing one of the earliest recorded uses of cannabis for its psychoactive properties. To these nomadic people, the plant was a gift from the earth. It was a way to transcend the harshness of their daily lives, to bridge the gap between the living and the dead, and to find a moment of peace in a world that was often violent and unforgiving. The smoke continues to rise, thick and sweet, and the sound of their chanting and laughter drifts out through the woolen walls, floating up toward the vast, starlit sky. For centuries, Many people thought Herodotus was simply making up tall tales. They called him the father of lies, believing his descriptions of the Scythian steam baths were nothing more than the exaggerations of a bored traveler. But history has a way of revealing the truth to those who are willing to dig for it. You find yourself transported forward in time, 2,500 years later. You are now in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, in the middle of the 20th century. The air here is even colder, and the ground is locked in a permanent layer of ice. You are standing next to a team of Russian archaeologists led by a man named Sergei Rudenko. They have discovered a series of ancient burial mounds, known as kurgans, which have been frozen solid for millennia. As the team carefully thaws the earth and opens the tombs, they find a world frozen in time. Because of the permafrost, the organic materials that would normally rot away have been perfectly preserved. You see the mummified bodies of Scythian chieftains, their skin still bearing those same tattoos you saw in your vision. You see their horses, buried with them to serve them in the afterlife, still wearing their ornate saddles and bridles. And then, in a corner of one of the tombs, the archaeologists find something that makes them stop in their tracks. It is a small wooden frame made of 3 poles. Nearby, there is a copper cauldron filled with stones and charred seeds. When they analyze these seeds in a laboratory, the results are clear. They are hemp seeds. There are also leather pouches containing more seeds and small sensors for burning them. The lies of Herodotus were not lies at all. He had been an accurate reporter of a reality that existed thousands of miles away from his home in Greece. The Scythians really did sit in felt tents, they really did throw hemp seeds on hot stones, and they really did use the resulting steam to find joy and purification. You see the connection now, a bridge of smoke and story that spans the ages. The Scythians were a people of the wind and the horizon. They had no cities, no permanent temples, and no written language. Their history was written in the dust of the plains and the smoke of their fires. They moved across the land like a shadow, leaving behind only these silent mounds of earth and the secrets hidden within them. The use of cannabis was not a peripheral part of their culture. It was woven into the very fabric of their existence, a tool for communal bonding and a way to navigate the heavy emotions of life and death. As you stand back and look at the landscape of history, you realize that the Scythian steam bath was just one chapter in a much larger story. Humans have always looked to the natural world for ways to alter their consciousness, to heal their bodies, and to soothe their troubled minds. The hemp plant, with its versatile fibers and its potent oils, was a constant companion to these early nomads as they traversed the rugged heart of Asia. You feel the cold wind of the steppe again, and the vision of the tent begins to fade. The riders depart, their horses' hooves making less and less sound until they are gone entirely. The smoke from the hemp seeds has long since dissipated into the atmosphere, but the memory of it remains, captured in the ink of an ancient Greek scroll and the frozen soil of a Siberian mountain. You take a deep breath of the cool nighttime air. The history of the world is not just a list of dates and kings. It is a sensory experience, a collection of smells and sounds and feelings that have been shared by millions of people who came before us. The Scythians, with their tattoos and their horses and their fragrant steam, were not so different from you. They sought comfort, they sought connection, and they sought a way to make sense of the vastness of the world around them. The stars above the steppe are the same stars you see tonight. The earth beneath your feet is the same earth that held their secrets for 25 centuries. As you drift closer to sleep, you can almost hear the faint, distant sound of the Scythians shouting with joy, a sound that echoes through the corridors of time, reminding us that the human story is a long, winding path, and that we have always found ways to light our way through the dark. The steam rises, the embers glow, and the past remains just a heartbeat away, waiting to be remembered in the quiet moments before the dreams begin. You step out of the swirling mists of the northern steppes and find yourself standing upon a vast, sun-drenched plain. The heat is a physical presence, a warm weight upon your shoulders, scented with the aroma of dried grass and the distant, cooling promise of a great river. This is the land of the 7 rivers, the heart of the ancient Vedic world. You are walking through a landscape that existed 3,000 years ago, a place where the earth and the sky feel closer together than they do today. The sky is an endless, piercing blue, and the horizon is punctuated by the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas, the dwelling place of the gods. As you walk, the sound of rhythmic chanting begins to drift toward you on the warm breeze. It is a deep, resonant sound, vibrating with a cadence that seems to match the heartbeat of the world. You follow the sound toward a small clearing where a ritual enclosure has been constructed. It is a simple space, marked out on the ground, but to the people gathered here, it is the center of the universe. In the middle of this space, a fire is burning. This is Agni, the god of fire, the divine messenger who carries the essence of earthly offerings up to the celestial realms. The smoke from the fire rises in a straight, steady column, disappearing into the bright air above. You take your place among the onlookers, sitting cross-legged on a mat of woven grass. The ground beneath you is dry and firm. Around the fire sit the priests, their skin bronzed by the sun and glistening with a thin veil of oil. They are performing the Soma sacrifice, the most important and mysterious ritual of the Vedic age. Your eyes are drawn to a collection of stalks and dried plant matter resting on a clean cloth near the altar. This is the Soma, the sacred plant that is both a king and a god. For centuries, scholars and seekers have wondered about the true identity of Soma. As you watch the priests begin their work, you see them take the stalks and place them upon a large, flat stone. Another priest holds a smaller, rounded stone, and with a measured, deliberate rhythm, he begins to pound the plant material. This is the pressing of the Soma. The sound is a dull, heavy thud that echoes the chanting of the hymns. You notice that as the stalks are crushed, a greenish-gold juice begins to flow. It has a pungent, resinous smell, something that reminds you of the deep forest and the high mountain ridges. The juice is collected and passed through a filter made of sheep wool. You watch as the liquid drips through the fibers, coming out clear and bright. It is then mixed with milk, honey, or barley flour in large wooden vats. This is the draught of immortality, the Amrita. The Rigveda, the oldest of the sacred scriptures of India, contains hundreds of hymns dedicated to this substance. You hear the priests recite verses that describe the effect of the drink. They speak of how the Soma enters the body and fills it with light, how it gives the drinker the strength of a giant and the vision of a seer. They say that by drinking Soma, they have become immortal and have known the gods. In this ancient time, the line between the physical and the spiritual is blurred. You realize that the people around you do not see this as a simple intoxicant. To them, the plant is a bridge. It is a way to transcend the limitations of the human mind and catch a glimpse of the eternal order of the cosmos. While the exact botanical identity of the original Soma has been lost to time, many believe that cannabis was a primary ingredient, or at least a close relative used in similar spiritual contexts. In these verses, the plant is often associated with the mountains and with a sense of expansive, celestial joy. You watch as a small cup of the filtered liquid is offered to the fire. As the liquid hits the glowing embers, there is a sudden hiss and a burst of fragrant steam. The smoke thickens for a moment, carrying the scent of the sacred draught into the air. You breathe in deeply, and the aroma is intoxicating. It is herbal, sweet, and slightly spicy. This is the sacred smoke, the medium through which the human and the divine communicate. You feel a sense of profound stillness settle over the clearing. The chanting continues, but it seems to be coming from everywhere at once, as if the very trees and stones are joined in the song. As the afternoon sun begins to dip lower in the sky, the ritual transitions into a quieter phase. You see the priests resting, their faces calm and luminous in the golden hour. The conversation turns to the stories of the gods. They tell of Indra, the king of the gods, the wielder of the thunderbolt, who drank vast quantities of soma to gain the power to defeat the dragon Vritra. This dragon had coiled itself around the mountains, holding back all the waters of the world. Only after consuming the soma did Indra have the courage and the strength to strike the dragon down, releasing the rivers to flow once again and bring life to the parched earth. In these stories, you see how the plant is tied to the cycles of nature, to the rain, the sun, and the fertility of the land. It is a symbol of the vital energy that flows through all things. As the centuries pass in the blink of an eye, you see the traditions begin to shift and evolve. The complex rituals of the Vedic age give way to new forms of devotion. You see the rise of Lord Shiva, the great ascetic, the god of destruction and transformation. Shiva is often depicted sitting in deep meditation on the icy peaks of Mount Kailash, his body smeared with white ash and his hair coiled like the serpents of the earth. For the followers of Shiva, cannabis takes on a new and even more central role. It becomes the herb of the yogi, the tool of the wanderer who seeks to detach from the illusions of the material world. You move forward in time, watching as the liquid soma of the ancient priests transforms into the bang and ganja of the later eras. You see a group of devotees standing by the banks of the Ganges River as the sun sets. They are preparing bang by grinding the leaves of the cannabis plant into a fine green paste using a mortar and pestle. They mix the paste with cold milk, sugar, and a blend of spices like cardamom, fennel, and black pepper. You are invited to join them as they sit on the stone steps leading down to the water. The river flows silently past, reflecting the purple and orange hues of the twilight sky. They offer you a cup of the cool, creamy green liquid. This is the drink of Shiva, a gift intended to settle the mind and open the heart. As you watch them drink, you notice a sense of quietude and brotherhood among the group. There is no rowdiness here, only a gentle, shared contemplation. They believe that the plant helps to still the constant chatter of the ego, allowing the soul to rest in the presence of the infinite. Nearby, a small pipe made of clay, known as a chillum, is being prepared. This is where the liquid tradition meets the tradition of smoke. A piece of glowing charcoal is placed on top of the dried herb, and as the devotee inhales, a thick, white cloud of smoke is released. This smoke is not seen as a mere byproduct. It is an offering. Just as the ancient Vedic priests saw the smoke of the altar as a messenger, these devotees see the smoke of the chillum as a way to carry their prayers upward. The scent is heavy and earthy, hanging in the humid evening air. You lean back against the cool stone of the riverbank and look up at the stars as they begin to appear. The transition from the high-energy, ritualistic pressing of soma to the quiet, meditative use of bang and ganja represents a long journey through the history of human consciousness. You realize that throughout these thousands of years, the plant has remained a constant companion to the seeker. It has been a medicine for the body, a catalyst for the imagination, and a sacrament for the spirit. The heat of the day has faded, replaced by a gentle coolness that rises from the water. The sounds of the world are muffled now. The distant ringing of temple bells, the soft lapping of the river against the stones, and the low murmur of voices all seem to blend into a single, soothing hum. You feel the weight of history all around you, but it is not a heavy weight. It is like a soft blanket, layers upon layers of stories and prayers that have been woven into the very fabric of this land. You think about the ancient poets who composed the hymns of the Rigveda, sitting perhaps in this very spot or on a mountain ridge high above. They looked at the same stars and felt the same wonder at the mystery of existence. They used the sacred smoke to help them find the words to describe the indescribable. And even now, in the quiet moments before sleep, that same sense of wonder is available to you. The past is not a distant, dead thing. It is alive in the rituals that continue, in the plants that still grow in the hidden valleys, and in the smoke that still rises toward the heavens. The fire in the ritual enclosure has burned down to a bed of glowing red embers. The priests have departed, leaving only the scent of cedar and the memory of their songs. The river continues its endless journey toward the sea, carrying the reflections of the stars upon its surface. You close your eyes, letting the atmosphere of the ancient world wrap around you. The world of the Vedas, the world of Shiva, and the world of the sacred smoke are all one, a single thread of human experience that stretches back into the dawn of time. You rest in that continuity, feeling the peace of the ages settle into your bones as the night deepens and the dreams begin to take shape in the shadows of the flickering firelight. You find yourself standing on a narrow, winding path high in the Alborz Mountains of northern Persia. The air here is thin and crisp, carrying the sharp, clean scent of cedar and the ancient smell of sun-warmed stone. Below you, the valleys are lost in a soft, blue haze, but above, the peaks of the mountains reach up to touch the pale sky like the jagged teeth of a sleeping giant. You are walking toward Alamut, the legendary eagle nest, a fortress carved directly into the living rock, seemingly inaccessible to anyone who does not know the secret ways. Your footsteps make a rhythmic, crunching sound on the gravel as you approach a heavy iron-bound gate. As you pass through, the transition is startling. The harsh, dry wind of the mountain pass dies away, replaced by a stillness so profound it feels like a physical weight. You have entered the legendary garden of Hassan-I Sabah, the man history remembers as the old man of the mountain. Imagine the temperature dropping just a few degrees, becoming perfectly cool and comfortable. You walk along a path made of smooth, pale river stones. To your left and right, the sounds of trickling water begin to fill your ears. This is a garden of wonders, a paradise hidden within a desert of stone. You see narrow channels of turquoise tile carrying clear mountain water that sparkles in the dappled sunlight. There are trees here that should not be able to grow at such an altitude. Dark, glossy leaves of pomegranate trees hang low, heavy with fruit that looks like polished rubies. There are apricots and figs, their sweetness hanging heavy in the air, mixing with the heady, intoxicating perfume of jasmine and roses. You find a place to sit on a low stone bench covered in thick, woven rugs. The fabric is soft beneath your hands, the intricate patterns of deep red and indigo swirling like the thoughts in a drowsy mind. As you sit, you become aware of the legend that has surrounded this place for nearly 1,000 years. It is a story told by travelers like Marco Polo, a tale of a secret society, a master of illusions, and a mysterious green substance that could transport a man to heaven and back again. In the stories, you are a young recruit, a loyal follower of the Ismaili sect. You have been brought here under the cover of night, perhaps after drinking a thick, sweet syrup or eating a small, honeyed cake infused with the concentrated resin of the cannabis plant, known as hashish. In your mind, you feel the world begin to soften at the edges. The sounds of the water channels become more musical, more deliberate, as if the water is singing directly to you. The colors of the flowers seem to glow with an inner light, more vibrant than anything you have ever seen in the dusty world outside the fortress walls. According to the legends, this garden was designed to be a physical manifestation of the paradise promised in the afterlife. There were beautiful people serving wine and milk, the finest foods, and an atmosphere of absolute peace. When the effects of the hashish wore off and you were taken back to your sparse barracks, you would believe with every fiber of your being that you had seen the gardens of heaven. You would do anything to return. You would become a Fida-I, a devoted one, ready to carry out the most dangerous missions with no fear of death, because death was simply the gateway back to the garden you had already tasted. You lean back against the cool stone wall and let the history and the myth blend together. While the tales of Marco Polo were likely exaggerated, flavored by the fears and fascinations of the Crusaders who returned to Europe with stories of the mysterious Hashishin, the reality of this place is no less captivating. The word assassin itself is born here, derived from the term Hashishin, which many historians believe was a pejorative label given to the followers of Hassan I-Sabah by their enemies. It meant the hashish eaters, a way of suggesting that their bravery and devotion were not born of faith, but of drug-induced madness. But as you look around this quiet, shaded sanctuary, you realize that the use of cannabis in this era was far more complex than a simple tool for manipulation. In the medieval Islamic world, cannabis was a subject of intense philosophical and medical debate. It was the herb of the dervishes and the fakirs, the wandering mystics who sought to detach themselves from the material world. For them, hashish was not a way to escape reality, but a way to see through the illusions of the mundane life, to find a sense of oneness with the divine. You watch a small bird splash in one of the water channels, sending tiny droplets into the air. The peace of the garden is absolute. You think about the chemistry of the plant as it was understood then. It was often consumed as majoun, a dense, sweet confection made with ground cannabis, honey, nuts, and spices like cinnamon and cloves. Imagine the taste of it on your tongue, earthy and slightly bitter, masked by the warmth of the spices and the cloying sweetness of the honey. You would feel it slowly warming your chest, a gentle weight spreading through your limbs, making the ground beneath you feel as soft as a cloud. The Hashishin were a small group, a minority within a minority, holding out against the great Seljuk Empire from their mountain strongholds. They were masters of asymmetrical warfare, and their power came from their ability to strike at the heart of their enemies with precision. But here in the garden, far from the daggers and the political intrigue, the atmosphere is one of profound intellectualism and spiritual searching. Hassan I-Sabah was a man of immense learning, a librarian and a scholar who turned Alamut into a center of science and philosophy. You can almost see the scholars walking these paths, their long robes brushing against the mint and thyme that grow between the stones. They would have discussed the stars, the movement of the planets, and the nature of the soul. For some of them, perhaps the use of cannabis was a part of their contemplative practice, a way to quiet the chatter of the ego and focus on the vast, mathematical beauty of the universe. It was a tool for the mind, a way to sharpen the senses and expand the boundaries of thought. As the sun begins to dip lower in the sky, casting long, golden shadows across the garden, you feel the stillness of the mountains settle over you. The air grows cooler, and the scent of the evening primrose begins to bloom, sweet and delicate. You are not a warrior, and you are not a recruit being tricked into a vision of paradise. You are simply a traveler in time, resting in a place where the line between history and legend has become thin and porous. The stories of the Hashishin traveled across the world, growing more fantastic with every telling. They became the bogeymen of the Middle Ages, shadow figures who could appear anywhere and disappear into thin air. But the root of their name remained tied to the plant, to the resinous green essence that was said to give them their power. Whether they actually used hashish as a ritualistic tool or whether it was a label pinned on them by those who feared them, the plant became forever linked with the idea of secret knowledge and hidden worlds. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the wind sighing through the cedar branches high above. The sound is like a long, slow breath. You feel the weight of your own body, the way your muscles have loosened and your breath has slowed. The world of the mountains is vast and silent. In this garden, protected by high walls and sheer cliffs, there is a sense of being completely removed from the rush of time. There are no deadlines here, no noise of engines or glow of screens. There is only the water, the stone, the scent of the roses, and the slow, steady pulse of the earth. You think about the journey of the plant, from the high steppes of Asia to these hidden mountain fortresses, and eventually to the pharmacies and salons of the West centuries later. It has always been a substance of the margins, a thing used by those who lived on the edges of society, whether by choice or by necessity. In the garden of the Hashishin, it was a symbol of the power of the mind to create its own reality, to build a paradise in the middle of a wilderness. The light is fading now, turning the sky into a deep, velvety violet. The stars are beginning to appear, bright and cold, looking down on the fortress of Alamut as they have for 1,000 years. You feel a deep sense of calm, a realization that the past is not a foreign country, but a place that lives on in the stories we tell and the quiet moments we share with the shadows. The garden is still here, in the quiet corners of history, waiting for anyone who wants to sit by the water and listen to the singing of the tiles. You let your chin rest on your chest, the coolness of the evening air a gentle touch on your skin. The scent of the garden is fading into the smell of the cold mountain night, a clean, empty scent that promises a deep and dreamless sleep. The legends of the old man of the mountain and his secret paradise are just whispers now, like the rustle of leaves in the dark. You are safe, you are still, and you are surrounded by the peace of a world that has long since passed into the realm of dreams. The stones are warm beneath you, holding the last of the day heat, and as the night takes hold, you drift further into the stillness, a part of the mountain, a part of the garden, a part of the long, slow breath of history. The landscape changes now, shifting from the high, quiet gardens of the east to the vast, shimmering expanse of the African savanna. You feel the air grow drier and warmer, carrying the scent of parched earth and sun-baked grass. The golden light of the afternoon stretches long across the plains, and you find yourself walking alongside a slow-moving caravan. This is a world of immense distance and patient movement, where the rhythm of your footsteps matches the steady sway of the pack animals. You are part of a network of trade that has pulsed through this continent for centuries, a web of paths connecting the vibrant ports of the coast to the deep, green heart of the interior. As you walk, you notice the variety of goods being carried. There are bundles of ivory, heavy and smooth, and sacks of fragrant spices that prickle your nose. But there is something else, something lighter and tucked away in small, woven pouches. It is the plant that has traveled thousands of miles to reach these plains. In this part of the world, it is often called bang or daga. You watch as a trader pauses to adjust a load, his hands calloused from years of travel. He smiles at you, a gesture of shared endurance in the heat. To him, this plant is not just a commodity. It is a companion for the long road, a medicine for the weary body, and a bridge to the spirit world. The history of this plant in Africa is a story of movement and adaptation. You look toward the eastern horizon, where the great Indian Ocean lies hidden beyond the hills. It was there, in the bustling port cities of the Swahili coast, that the plant first arrived. Arab and Persian merchants, sailing their wooden dhows across the seasonal monsoon winds, brought seeds and knowledge from the distant lands of the Middle East and India. You can almost see the ships in your mind, their white sails billowing like clouds against the turquoise water, carrying treasures that would change the cultural landscape of the continent. From the coast, the plant moved inland, following the same routes you are walking now. It traveled in the pockets of traders, in the memories of travelers, and in the traditions of migrating peoples. You see how it has become woven into the fabric of daily life. As you pass a small settlement near a watering hole, you observe a group of elders gathered under the shade of a massive baobab tree. The tree looks like it has stood for 1,000 years, its trunk thick and gnarled. In the center of the group, a long-stemmed pipe is being passed from hand to hand. The smoke rises in thin, blue ribbons, curling upward into the leaves. There is no rush here. The conversation is low and melodic, punctuated by long silences that feel full of meaning. You realize that for these people, the plant is a social glue. It is used to seal agreements, to welcome strangers, and to mark the passing of time. You sit for a moment on a flat stone watching the scene. The smoke has a sweet, earthy aroma that blends with the smell of the cooking fires. You learn that in many cultures across the savanna, the use of the plant is deeply ritualized. It is not something to be taken lightly. It is a tool for reflection and for connecting with the ancestors who walked these same paths long ago. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and deep orange, you continue your journey. The savanna seems to breathe with the coming of the evening. You hear the distant call of a bird and the rustle of the wind through the tall, dry grass. The plant you are tracking has moved far beyond the coast now. It has reached the Great Lakes of the interior and is pushing southward toward the mountains and the sea. It has been adopted by the Bantu-speaking farmers and the nomadic herders alike. Each group has found their own name for it, their own way of preparing it, and their own stories to tell about its origin. You think about the ingenuity of the people you have met. You see a hunter leaning on his spear, watching the horizon. He carries a small gourd filled with dried leaves. For him, the plant provides a sense of focus and a relief from the physical toll of the hunt. You see a woman tending to her family near a cluster of thatched-roof dwellings. She knows how to use the seeds and the oil for healing, treating ailments of the skin or the stomach with wisdom passed down through generations. The plant is a pharmacy, a library, and a sanctuary all at once. The technology of consumption has also evolved as it moved across the land. You notice a young man carving a pipe from a piece of dark, polished wood. He works with precision, shaping the bowl and the long, thin neck. In some areas, you have seen water pipes made from the shells of coconuts or hollowed-out gourds. These designs allow the smoke to be cooled through water, a technique that was likely introduced by the same coastal traders who brought the seeds. It is a beautiful example of how ideas and objects are transformed when they enter a new environment, taking on local characteristics while retaining their original essence. The caravan begins to slow down as the twilight deepens. It is time to make camp for the night. You help gather dry wood for the fire, feeling the rough texture of the bark against your palms. The air is turning cool, a welcome relief from the baking sun of the afternoon. As the flames roar to life, casting flickering shadows against the canvas of the tents, the traders gather around. They share a meal of porridge and dried meat, their voices softening as the stars begin to emerge in the vast overhead canopy. You lie back against your pack, looking up at the Milky Way. It is so bright here, away from the glow of any city, that it looks like a river of silver spilled across the black velvet of the sky. One of the older traders lights his pipe, the ember glowing like a fallen star in the darkness. He begins to tell a story, his voice rhythmic and steady. He speaks of the great empires of the past, of the kings who ruled from stone palaces and the warriors who protected the herds. He speaks of how the plant has always been there, a silent witness to the rise and fall of civilizations, a constant thread in the tangled tapestry of human experience. You feel a deep sense of peace in this moment. The world feels immense, yet you are connected to it through the simple acts of walking, breathing, and listening. The plant has traveled this far not because of any grand design, but through the quiet, persistent actions of individuals. It moved because a trader wanted a gift for a friend, because a healer sought a better way to ease pain, or because a traveler wanted a reminder of home. It is a history of human connection, of the ways we share the things we value with those we meet along the way. The fire begins to settle into a bed of glowing coals. The sounds of the savanna at night surround you. There is the chirping of insects, the occasional low rumble of a distant predator, and the steady breathing of the sleeping camp. You feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders. The journey across the savanna is long, but you are not tired. You are part of the movement, part of the story that continues to unfold across the continents and the centuries. As you drift on the edge of sleep, you think about the seeds tucked away in the pouches of the caravan. Those seeds carry the potential for new gardens, new rituals, and new conversations in lands yet to be reached. They are tiny vessels of history, waiting for the right soil and the right hands to bring them to life. The plant is no longer a stranger to this land. It has become part of the earth itself, rooted in the red dust and nourished by the seasonal rains. The darkness is absolute now, save for the dying embers and the brilliant stars. You close your eyes, the image of the golden savanna still lingering in your mind. You are a traveler in time, a witness to the slow and steady spread of a plant that has shaped the lives of millions. You feel the rhythm of the earth beneath you, a pulse that has beaten since the beginning of time. You are safe, you are still, and you are part of the long, wandering history of the world. The silence of the night is profound. It is a silence that holds the echoes of every caravan that has ever crossed these plains, every word spoken around a fire, and every dream dreamt under the African sky. You let yourself sink deeper into the stillness, the cool air brushing against your skin. The journey continues tomorrow, but for now, there is only the rest, the peace, and the timeless beauty of the savanna. You think about the way the plant reached the southern tip of the continent. It was a journey of thousands of miles, crossing rivers and mountains, passing through forests and deserts. It was carried by the Bantu peoples as they migrated, bringing their cattle and their crops to new territories. They brought the plant with them, ensuring its survival and its growth in every new home they found. In the south, it met the indigenous peoples who had lived there for millennia, and a new chapter of history began as they too discovered the properties of the leaf they called daga. Every step of this journey was a step toward the present. Every pipe carved, every seed planted, and every story told contributed to the world as we know it today. It is a history written not in books, but in the habits and traditions of people. It is a history that you can feel in the air around you, a history that is as tangible as the earth beneath your feet. You are drifting now, the boundaries between the past and the present blurring in the gentle dark. The caravan, the fire, and the vast savanna are all part of a single, continuous flow. You are a drop in that river, moving quietly toward the dawn. The story of the traders is your story, a story of seeking, of sharing, and of finding a place in the world. As the last of the firelight fades, you surrender to the night, knowing that the path is long and the history is deep, and that you are exactly where you are meant to be. The stars above seem to pulse in time with your own heartbeat. You imagine the plant growing in small patches near the huts of the farmers, its jagged leaves reaching for the sun. You imagine the smoke of 1,000 fires rising into the air across the vastness of the continent. It is a quiet, steady presence, a constant companion to the human spirit. And as the coolness of the deep night settles over the camp, you let go of the day, falling into a dreamless, peaceful sleep, cradled by the ancient rhythms of the African savanna. You wake to the sound of a different world. The gentle rustle of the savanna grass and the distant calls of the wild have faded away, replaced by the rhythmic thumping of heavy hammers and the sharp, salty tang of the Atlantic Ocean. You are no longer under the vast African sky. Instead, you find yourself standing on the edge of a bustling shipyard in the late 16th century. The air here is thick with the scent of pine resin, hot tar, and the earthy, musk-like aroma of dried vegetation. The ground beneath your feet is a mixture of packed earth, sawdust, and wood shavings that crunch softly as you move. Before you, looming like a wooden mountain, is the massive hull of a great galleon. It is a cathedral of oak and elm, still skeletal in places, but already showing the imposing lines of a vessel built for war and discovery. But as your eyes travel upward, past the intricate carvings of the stern and the stout curves of the hull, you notice what truly gives this giant its life. It is the rigging, thousands of yards of rope, ranging from the thickness of a child's finger to the girth of a grown man's thigh, drape across the masts like the webs of a giant spider. This is not just any rope. This is the muscle and bone of the age of sail, and it is made entirely of hemp. You walk closer to the edge of the dock, where the water of the harbor laps against the stone. You see a group of men hauling a massive cable toward the ship. Their faces are weathered by the sun and etched with the lines of hard labor. They grunt in unison as they pull, their calloused hands gripping the rough, golden-brown fibers of the hempen rope. You can see the individual strands twisted together in a spiral of incredible strength. This plant, which you have followed through the ancient steppes and the hidden valleys of the East, has now become the most critical strategic resource of the modern world. In this era, the power of a nation is measured by the strength of its navy, and the strength of a navy is built on hemp. You recall the laws of the land in England. Not long ago, in 1533, King Henry VIII issued a royal decree that would change the landscape of the countryside. He commanded that for every 60 acres of arable land, a farmer must dedicate a specific portion to the cultivation of hemp. This was not a request. It was a mandate of national security. Failure to comply resulted in heavy fines. His daughter, Queen Elizabeth I, later increased these penalties. As you look around this shipyard, you understand why. Without hemp, these ships would be nothing more than floating piles of lumber, unable to catch the wind or hold their position against the tide. You step away from the noise of the shipyard and wander down a long, narrow building known as a rope walk. It is an incredible structure, stretching out for hundreds of yards, so long that the far end disappears into a misty point of light. The air inside is cooler and smells strongly of the raw fiber. You watch a master rope maker at work. He has a thick bundle of combed hemp fibers wrapped around his waist, looking like a massive silvery beard. He attaches a few strands to a rotating hook and begins to walk backward, away from the wheel. As he moves, he expertly feeds the fibers into the spinning twist with his fingers. You can see the concentration in his eyes. He must maintain a perfectly even tension. If the twist is too loose, the rope will be weak. If it is too tight, it will snap under the strain of a storm. It is a slow, meditative process. You watch as the thin yarn grows longer and longer, a golden thread connecting the earth of the farm to the depths of the sea. These yarns will be twisted together to form strands, and those strands will be laid into the heavy cables that will eventually hold a 4-ton anchor against the fury of a gale. You reach out and touch a finished coil of rope resting on a wooden pallet. It feels coarse and oily to the touch. This oil is the natural resin of the plant, which gives the rope its remarkable resistance to rot. In the harsh environment of the ocean, where salt water and constant moisture would cause cotton or flax to decay in weeks, hemp remains strong. It is the only fiber that can survive the grueling conditions of a long voyage across the Atlantic. You leave the rope walk and find yourself standing on a high cliff overlooking a harbor in Spain. It is the year 1588. Below you, the sight is breathtaking. This is the Great Armada, the Invincible Armada, a fleet of 130 ships gathered by King Philip II to challenge the power of England. The sun reflects off the water, and the masts of the ships look like a dense forest. You can only imagine the sheer volume of hemp required to outfit such a fleet. Historians will later estimate that the Spanish Armada carried over 3,000 tons of hempen rigging and sails. Think about that for a moment as you watch the ships sway gently in the breeze. Every single sail you see, the vast expanses of fabric that catch the wind and drive these giants forward, is made of cannabis. Even the word canvas finds its linguistic roots in the word cannabis. You can see the heavy, durable weave of the sailcloth. It is a pale, off-white color, reinforced with thick seams. When the wind catches those sails, the sound is like a clap of thunder. The tension on the hempen ropes is immense, yet they hold. They stretch just enough to absorb the shock of the wind but remain firm enough to transmit that power to the wooden hull. You watch as a smaller boat rows out to one of the massive galleons. In the back of the boat are sacks of what the sailors call oakum. You have seen how this is made. It is the recycled remains of old, worn-out ropes. When a rope finally reaches the end of its life, it is not thrown away. Instead, old sailors and prisoners spend their days unpicking the strands, turning the rope back into loose, fluffy fiber. This fiber is then soaked in pine tar. In the shipyard, you saw workmen using mallets and caulking irons to drive this tar-soaked oakum into the narrow gaps between the planks of the ship's hull. This is what makes the vessel watertight. As the wood swells in the water, it presses against the sticky hemp fibers, creating a seal that can withstand the pressure of the deep ocean. You realize that hemp is not just pulling the ship and moving the ship, it is also the very thing keeping the ship afloat. The sun begins to set over the harbor, casting long, golden shadows across the water. You feel a sense of profound scale. The entire global economy of this era, the age of discovery, the spice trade, the colonial expansions, and the great naval battles, all of it rests on the shoulders of this one plant. From the tiny seeds planted in the damp soil of a European farm to the towering masts of a Spanish warship, The journey of the hemp plant is the journey of human ambition. You imagine the sailors high up in the rigging, their bare feet gripping the hempen foot ropes as they climb 60 feet above the deck. They rely on the strength of these fibers with their very lives. If a single rope fails during a midnight storm, the mast could snap, or the sailor could be cast into the dark, churning waves. But the hemp holds. It has been tested by the salt, the wind, and the weight of history. As the fleet begins to weigh anchor, you hear the rhythmic clicking of the capstans. Men push against heavy wooden bars, winding the massive hemp cables around a central drum to lift the anchors from the seabed. The sound echoes across the water, a steady, driving beat. The sails are unfurled, dropping down from the yards like heavy curtains. They billow out, catching the evening breeze, and the great ships begin to move. You watch them go, a procession of giants heading out into the unknown. The wooden hulls creak and groan, and the hempen rigging hums with the tension of the wind. It is a symphony of natural materials, a testament to a time when humans worked in close harmony with the products of the earth to achieve the impossible. You stand there on the shore until the last of the white sails disappears over the horizon, leaving only the sound of the waves and the lingering scent of salt and tar. The world of the Great Armada is a world of physical sensation, of rough textures and immense strength. It is a world where a single plant could determine the fate of empires. You feel the weight of that history as you watch the empty sea, the lessons of the past woven into the very fabric of the ships that once sailed it. The air grows cool, and the bustle of the harbor fades into the quiet of the coming night. You carry with you the knowledge of the rope and the sail, the secret strength of the fiber that conquered the oceans. And as the stars begin to appear, reflecting in the dark, still water of the harbor, you find a place to rest, your mind filled with the image of golden fields and white sails drifting in the endless blue. You wake before the sun has fully crested the horizon, the air in your small timber cabin still holding the damp chill of a Virginia morning. The year is 1619, and the world around you is a vast, untamed expanse of green and brown, a landscape of towering ancient oaks and the rhythmic pulse of the Chesapeake Bay nearby. You rise from your pallet, your boots clicking softly on the rough-hewn floorboards. As you step outside, the mist clings to the ground like a thick white shroud, swirling around your ankles. This is the new world, a place of immense promise and backbreaking labor. And today your hands will return to the soil to tend to a crop that the crown considers as vital as gold itself. You walk toward the edge of the cleared land where the forest gives way to the structured rows of the plantation. In your hand, you carry a small leather pouch. You reach inside and feel the cool, smooth texture of the seeds. They are small, teardrop-shaped, and mottled with shades of gray and brown. These are hemp seeds, descendants of the same plants that have traveled across the Silk Road and through the heart of Europe for thousands of years. They have crossed the Atlantic in the dark, cramped holds of wooden ships, tucked away in barrels to keep them dry from the salt spray. Now, they are here, ready to take root in the rich, dark loam of a different continent. You remember the stories told by the sailors at the docks, how the Spanish were the first to bring these seeds across the Great Water nearly 80 years ago. They planted them in the fertile valleys of Chile, hoping to create a steady supply of fiber for the rigging of their galleons. But today, the task falls to you and your neighbors in this fledgling colony of Jamestown. The law is clear. The Virginia Company has mandated that every settler must set aside land for the cultivation of hemp. It is not a suggestion but a requirement of your survival and the survival of the empire. England is a maritime power, and a maritime power is only as strong as its rope. You reach the field where the soil has already been turned by the heavy iron blade of the plow. The smell of the earth is overwhelming, sweet and musky and full of life. You begin to walk the rows, your thumb pushing the seeds into the ground at a precise depth. It is a meditative process. You move with a steady rhythm, your shadow stretching long and thin behind you as the sun finally breaks over the trees. You think about the journey these plants are about to take. In a few weeks, the first tiny green shoots will pierce the surface, unfolding their jagged leaves to drink in the intense Virginia sun. The growth is rapid, almost aggressive. You watch as the stalks climb higher each day, eventually reaching twice your height. By midsummer, you find yourself walking through a literal forest of hemp. The plants grow so closely together that they shade out the weeds, creating a cool, emerald world beneath their canopy. When the wind blows, the entire field sighs, a dry, rustling sound that reminds you of the snapping of sails. The smell is distinctive, a sharp, resinous scent that clings to your clothes and skin, a mixture of pine and heavy earth. It is a smell that means progress. It means that the ropes that hold the world together are growing right here beneath your feet. As the season turns and the humidity of the summer begins to break, the work becomes even more intense. Harvesting is not for the faint of heart. You stand before the tall, fibrous stalks with a heavy curved knife in your hand. Each swing must be deliberate. You cut the plants at the base, the thick stems resisting the blade with a stubborn strength. Once they are felled, you gather them into bundles, your muscles aching from the repetitive motion. You are not just harvesting a plant, you are harvesting the raw material of civilization. From these stalks will come the heavy anchor cables of the Royal Navy, the fine linen shirts of the wealthy, and the durable sacks used to transport grain across the colonies. You carry the bundles down to the edge of a slow-moving creek. This is the part of the process known as retting. You submerge the stalks in the shallow water, weighting them down with heavy stones so they remain beneath the surface. For several weeks, the water will do its work, breaking down the pectins and resins that bind the tough fibers to the woody core of the stem. You visit the creek every day, checking the progress. The water turns a dark, murky color, and the air around the bank becomes thick with the smell of fermentation. It is an unpleasant odor, pungent and sour, but to a farmer, it is the smell of a job well done. It is the scent of the fibers loosening, preparing to be transformed. Eventually, the time comes to pull the bundles from the water. They are heavy and dripping, slick with the residue of the creek. You spread them out in the grass to dry under the autumn sun. Once the moisture has left the stalks and they become brittle, you move to the hemp brake. This is a massive wooden contraption, a heavy lever that you lift and drop repeatedly onto the dried stalks. The sound is a rhythmic thud, echoing across the clearing like a slow, steady heartbeat. With each blow, the woody inner core of the plant, known as the hurd, shatters and falls away, leaving behind the long, pale strands of fiber. Your hands are calloused and stained, but you take a moment to examine a handful of the fiber. It is remarkably strong, yet surprisingly soft to the touch. You can see why this plant has been prized for millennia. It is versatile and enduring. You imagine these very strands being spun into yarn on a heavy wooden wheel, then woven into the heavy canvas that will cover the wagons heading west into the unknown interior of the continent. You imagine them being twisted into the thin, strong twine that will mend the nets of the fishermen in New England. The sun begins to set, casting a deep orange glow across the cleared fields. You look out over the landscape and see other columns of smoke rising from distant chimneys, each one marking a homestead where someone like you is doing the same work. In the years to come, this crop will spread to Maryland, to Pennsylvania, and eventually to the limestone-rich soils of Kentucky. It will become a cornerstone of the colonial economy, a silent partner in the building of a new nation. Even the great leaders of this land, men like Washington and Jefferson, will dedicate pages of their diaries to the successes and failures of their hemp crops, debating the best ways to sow the seeds and the most efficient methods for processing the fiber. You gather the last of the cleaned fiber into a large bale, securing it with a length of hemp rope you made the previous year. The irony does not escape you as you pull the knot tight. You walk back toward your cabin, the evening air turning crisp. Inside, you light a small oil lamp. The flame flickers, casting long shadows against the log walls. You sit at your small table, your body weary but satisfied. You think about the long chain of history that has led you to this moment. From the ancient steppes of Central Asia to the decks of the ships that brought you here, this plant has been a constant companion to humanity. It has clothed us, protected us, and helped us navigate the vast, unforgiving oceans. As you prepare for sleep, you hear the distant hoot of an owl and the soft rustle of the wind in the trees. The New World is still a wild and dangerous place, but as you close your eyes, you feel a sense of connection to the earth beneath you. You are part of a grand experiment, a blending of old knowledge and new soil. The seeds you planted today will grow into the fabric of tomorrow, literally and figuratively. The fibers you have labored over will find their way into every corner of this expanding world, holding together the very structure of the life you are building. You drift off to sleep, the rhythmic thud of the hemp brake still echoing faintly in your mind, a steady pulse in the quiet darkness of the Virginia woods. You step out from the shadows of the Virginia woods and find yourself standing on a damp, cobblestone street. The air is cooler here, thick with the heavy scent of coal smoke and the salty tang of the Thames River. You have traveled forward in time and across the Atlantic, arriving in the heart of London during the middle of the 19th century. The rhythmic thud of the hemp brake has been replaced by the steady clip-clop of horse hooves and the iron grind of carriage wheels against the stones. The gas lamps are just flickering to life as the afternoon light fades into a bruised purple sky, casting long, wavering shadows across the brickwork. You pull your heavy wool coat tighter against the mist and begin to walk. You are no longer looking for industrial fields or rugged survival. You are looking for a small, discreet shop with a window full of colored glass bottles. This is the era of the Great Exhibition, a time of rapid scientific discovery and a growing obsession with the exotic wonders of the British Empire. In this world, the plant you once saw being broken down for rope has undergone a radical transformation in the public mind. It is no longer just a source of fiber. It has become a sophisticated medicine, a miracle of the East, and a staple of the Victorian apothecary. You stop in front of a shop with a heavy oak door. Above the entrance, a sign hangs from a wrought iron bracket, swaying slightly in the breeze. It reads apothecary and chemist. You push the door open, and a bell chimes softly, announcing your arrival. The air inside is still and warm, filled with a complex, dizzying perfume of dried herbs, camphor, sweet lavender, and earthy roots. Tall, dark mahogany shelves reach from the floor to the high ceiling, packed with thousands of amber glass jars. Each jar bears a hand-painted label in elegant gold script, containing powders, barks, and resins gathered from the farthest corners of the globe. The chemist, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and a pristine white apron, nods to you from behind a polished counter. He is not a merchant of shadows. He is a man of high standing, a professional dedicated to the new science of pharmacology. You watch as he reaches for a particular bottle, one labeled cannabis indica. This is the bridge between the old world and the new. For centuries, the Western world knew hemp as a plant for sails and sacks, but a brilliant Irish physician named William Brooke O'Shaughnessy changed everything. You imagine O'Shaughnessy years earlier working in Calcutta. He was a man of intense curiosity who observed the local practitioners of medicine in India. He saw them using preparations of the plant to treat seizures, muscle spasms, and even the terrifying symptoms of rabies and cholera. While others might have dismissed these practices as folklore, O'Shaughnessy approached them with the rigor of a modern scientist. He performed experiments, carefully documenting the dosages and the effects. When he returned to England in the early 1840s, he brought with him a supply of the potent resin and a collection of research papers that would stun the medical establishment. The chemist on the other side of the counter is a beneficiary of that knowledge. He takes a small glass vial and begins to prepare a tincture. This is the most common way for a Victorian citizen to consume the plant. He takes a concentrated extract of the flowering tops of the plant and dissolves it in high-proof alcohol. The resulting liquid is a deep, dark emerald green, almost black in the dim light of the shop. It is thick and viscous, a potent concentrate that represents the marriage of ancient herbalism and modern chemistry. You watch his precise movements as he uses a glass dropper to fill a small, cobalt blue bottle. This medicine is not something you would find in a back alley. It is what the doctor ordered. In this era, cannabis is listed in the official pharmacopoeia of both the United Kingdom and the United States. It is prescribed for an incredible range of ailments. If you suffered from a persistent cough, a migraine that left you blinded by light, or the crushing pain of neuralgia, your doctor would likely write a script for a cannabis tincture. It was seen as a safer, less addictive alternative to opium, which was also widely available but beginning to reveal its darker, more destructive side. You lean against the counter, listening to the muffled sounds of the city outside. The Victorian world is one of rigid social structures and intense industry, but it is also a world of hidden pain. The physical demands of the era are high, and the medical options are often limited. For many, these tinctures are a godsend. You think of the weary factory worker with aching joints, or the high society lady retreating to her darkened bedroom to escape a tension headache. They would take a few drops of this liquid, perhaps stirred into a glass of water or dropped onto a square of sugar, and wait for the edge to be taken off their suffering. There is a quiet dignity in this scene. There is no stigma here, no sense of rebellion or illicit behavior. The use of the plant is clinical, respectable, and quiet. Even Queen Victoria herself is often whispered about in these histories. While the historical evidence is debated by some, it is widely believed that her personal physician, Sir John Russell Reynolds, prescribed cannabis to the Queen to alleviate the discomfort of menstrual cramps. Reynolds was a great advocate for the plant, writing in the medical journal The Lancet that cannabis was one of the most valuable medicines we possess. As the chemist corks the bottle and wraps it in a piece of brown paper, tying it with a bit of twine, you realize how integrated this plant was into the daily life of the 19th century. Large pharmaceutical companies that you would still recognize today, names like Eli Lilly, Park Davis, and Squibb, all produce standardized extracts of cannabis. They competed to create the most reliable and potent versions, ensuring that a doctor in London and a doctor in New York were giving their patients the same quality of medicine. You take the small parcel from the chemist and feel its weight in your hand. It is a symbol of a time when the boundaries between nature and the laboratory were just beginning to be drawn. You walk toward the back of the shop, where a small velvet chair sits near a coal stove. You sit down, the warmth of the fire seeping into your bones. The flickering orange light dances on the rows of glass jars, and for a moment, the world feels very small and safe. The Victorian era was the golden age of the tincture. It was a time of transition, where the ancient knowledge of the East was being filtered through the industrial lens of the West. You think about the slow, methodical pace of life back then. There was no instant gratification. If you were sick, you waited for the doctor to arrive. You waited for the chemist to mix your remedy. You waited for the medicine to take hold. This slow passage of time is mirrored in the way the tincture works. Unlike the immediate impact of smoking, a tincture must be absorbed through the digestive system. It is a slow, creeping relief that begins at the edges of the mind and gradually settles into the body. You close your eyes and imagine the sensation of that Victorian relief. It is not the jarring, psychedelic experience of modern varieties. It is a dulling of the sharp corners of the world. The sounds of the street outside seem to drift further away. The clatter of the carriages becomes a rhythmic hum, like the sound of a distant ocean. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner of the shop slows down, each beat of the pendulum a heavy, deliberate marker of time. In this quiet space, you reflect on how the plant has traveled. From the ancient burial mounds of the steppes to the vast fiber plantations of the colonies, and now to the polished mahogany shelves of the city. It has been a survivor, adapting its role to meet the needs of each new generation. In the Victorian mind, it was a tool of civilization, a way to master the frailties of the human body using the bounty of the natural world. The fog outside the shop window grows thicker, swallowing the street lamps until only a faint, golden glow remains. The world of the Victorian apothecary is a world of shadows and secrets, but also one of profound hope. They believed that for every malady, nature had provided a cure, and that it was their job to find it, refine it, and bottle it. As you sit in the warmth, the smell of the herbs and the steady heat of the stove wrap around you like a heavy blanket. The bustling city of the 19th century is still out there, with all its progress and its problems, but in here, in this sanctuary of glass and wood, there is only the quiet, steady pulse of history. You feel the weight of your eyelids growing heavier. The journey through the ages is long, and the Victorian evening is the perfect place to pause. The stories of doctors and queens, of chemists and patients, all swirl together into a gentle, incoherent mist. You are a traveler in time, and for now, the journey has led you to a place of rest, surrounded by the amber glow of 1,000 glass jars and the silent promise of a peaceful night. The embers in the stove pop softly, a tiny sound in the vast silence of the past, as you prepare to leave the cobblestones behind and drift toward the next chapter of the story. Imagine the sun hanging low and heavy over the Gulf of Mexico. You are standing on a dusty road where the horizon seems to shimmer under the weight of the afternoon heat. There is a sense of transition in the air, a feeling that the world is growing smaller even as it expands. People are moving. They carry their lives in small bundles, their traditions in their memories, and sometimes, tucked away in a pocket or a satchel, they carry seeds. You are witnessing a moment in the early 20th century when the map of the world was being redrawn not just by treaties, but by the footsteps of laborers, sailors, and musicians. As you walk along this road, you notice the landscape changing. The dry, scrubby brush of the borderlands gives way to the lush, humid greenery of the delta. You are following a path that thousands have taken before you. It is a path of migration. In Mexico, the country is in the midst of a great and turbulent revolution. You can almost hear the distant echoes of horses and the shouts of soldiers. But here, closer to the border, the sounds are quieter. You see families moving north, seeking safety and work in the fields and mines of the United States. With them, they bring a plant that has been part of their folk medicine and their daily lives for generations. In this era, most people in the United States know the plant by its scientific name, cannabis, or perhaps by the tinctures sold in pharmacies. But as you listen to the conversations around you, you hear a new word whispered in the breeze. Marijuana. It is a word that feels different on the tongue, and as it crosses the Rio Grande, it begins to take on a new life. You see the laborers sitting by their small fires at night, the smoke curling up toward the vast Texas stars. For them, this plant is a way to ease the ache of a long day spent picking cotton or working the rails. It is a familiar comfort from a home they have left behind. You continue your journey, leaving the dusty borderlands and traveling toward the sea. You find yourself on the bustling docks of New Orleans. The air here is thick with the scent of salt, rotting wood, and expensive spices. It is a sensory overload. You watch the great steamships groan as they pull into the harbor, their hulls heavy with goods from the Caribbean and South America. This is a crossroads of the world. You see sailors from Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad stepping onto the wooden piers. They bring with them their own traditions of the plant, which they call ganja. The way they use it is different from the medicinal drops found in the quiet drugstores of the North. They smoke it in hand-rolled cigarettes or pipes, a practice that is still largely foreign to the urban middle class of the time. You walk through the narrow, damp streets of the French Quarter, where the sound of brass instruments begins to rise from the basements and open windows. It is the birth of jazz. You feel the rhythm in the cobblestones beneath your feet. It is a slow, syncopated beat that seems to mirror the way the smoke from the sailors' pipes drifts through the humid air. In these dimly lit rooms, the plant finds a new home among the musicians. You see a young cornet player leaning against a brick wall, his eyes closed as he takes a slow breath. For him and his peers, the plant is not just a medicine or a way to relax after work. It is something that seems to stretch time, allowing them to find the spaces between the notes. It fits perfectly into this new, improvisational world. You realize that you are watching the beginning of a cultural shift. The plant is moving out of the rural fields and into the heartbeat of the modern city. You notice that as the plant becomes more visible in these urban spaces, the way people look at it begins to change. In the quiet pharmacies you passed earlier, it was a respected ingredient in cough syrups and nerve tonics. But here, in the shadows of the jazz clubs and the crowded housing of the dock workers, it is starting to be viewed with a growing sense of mystery and, in some quarters, suspicion. You see a newspaper discarded on a bench, its headlines speaking of the strange new habits of the arrivals. The word marijuana is being used more frequently now, often linked to the fringes of society. You walk further into the city, feeling the transition from the bright, hot sun of the afternoon to the cool, blue shadows of evening. The city feels alive, but in a way that is drowsy and slow. You pass a group of men sitting on a porch, their voices low as they share a smoke. There is a sense of community here, a shared language that does not need many words. This is how the plant spreads, not through grand advertisements or official channels, but through these small, quiet moments of human connection. It moves from a sailor to a musician, from a laborer to a neighbor. As you navigate these streets, you see how the plant is becoming a symbol of the outsider. It is becoming associated with the people who live on the edges of the mainstream, those who work the hardest jobs and play the most daring music. You can feel the tension building in the air, a conflict between the old world and the new. The authorities are beginning to take notice of these border crossings, not just of people but of customs. You sense that the era of the plant as a simple, unremarkable farm crop or a quiet medicine is coming to an end. It is entering a more complicated chapter of its history. The night deepens, and the sounds of the city begin to soften. You find yourself standing by the edge of the Mississippi River, watching the dark water flow toward the sea. The river has been a highway for these cultural echoes, carrying the music and the traditions of the South up to the cities of the North. You think about the journey this plant has taken, from the ancient steppes of Asia to the mountains of Mexico, and now to the vibrant, chaotic streets of an American port city. It has crossed oceans and borders, changing names and meanings with every mile. You feel a sense of stillness now, as if the world is taking a long, slow breath. The movement of the people and the shifting of cultures can feel overwhelming, but in the quiet of the night, it all seems like part of a natural flow. You are a witness to the way the world remakes itself, one small interaction at a time. The smoke from a distant fire or a nearby pipe blends with the mist rising from the river, creating a haze that blurs the lines between the past and the present. You walk away from the river, heading toward a quieter part of town where the houses are set back from the street and the gardens are overgrown with jasmine and honeysuckle. The smell is intoxicating, sweet and heavy. It reminds you that despite all the changes and the movements of history, the earth continues to grow its wonders. The plant you have been following is just one of many that have shaped the human story, a silent companion to our migrations and our creativity. In this quiet neighborhood, you can see the lamplight glowing behind curtained windows. Inside those homes, people are living out the small details of their lives, largely unaware of the grand historical shifts taking place just a few streets away. You realize that history is often made in these quiet spaces, in the things we choose to carry with us and the traditions we hold on to when we are far from home. The border crossings you have witnessed today are more than just movements across a line on a map. They are the ways we share ourselves with one another. The air is cooler now, and the frantic energy of the docks feels like a distant memory. You find a place to rest, perhaps a wooden bench under a large, spreading oak tree. As you sit, you listen to the crickets and the rustle of the leaves. The world feels ancient and patient. The plant, with its long history and its many names, will continue to move and evolve, just as we do. It will find its way into new stories and new songs, echoing through the decades to come. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the night wash over you, feeling the weight of the history you have just walked through. It is a heavy, comfortable weight, like a thick blanket on a cool night. The story continues, drifting forward like the river, carrying the echoes of the past into the quiet promise of the future. You are standing on a cobblestone street in New Orleans, and the year is 1920. The air is thick and heavy, clinging to your skin with the humid weight of the Mississippi River. It is late, or perhaps it is very early, and the moon is a pale sliver hanging over the French Quarter. As you walk, the sounds of the night begin to shift. The distant clip-clop of a horse-drawn carriage fades, replaced by the low, rhythmic pulse of a bass fiddle and the bright, brassy wail of a cornet. This is the birthplace of jazz, and you are about to step into a world where music and a certain green herb are becoming inextricably linked. You follow the sound down a narrow alleyway, past iron-wrought balconies dripping with ferns. You reach a door that looks like any other, but when you push it open, a cloud of sweet, pungent smoke billows out to greet you. It is different from the heavy, acrid smell of tobacco. This is herbal, earthy, and slightly floral. You have entered a tea pad. In this era, these were the secret living rooms of the city, places where people of all backgrounds gathered to listen to the new, syncopated rhythms that were changing the world. You find a seat on a velvet sofa that has seen better days, and you watch the musicians on the small wooden stage. They are called vipers. This is the name they have given themselves, taken from the hissing sound made when taking a quick, sharp breath from a hand-rolled cigarette. To these musicians, the plant is not a drug in the way the modern world might define it. It is a creative tool. You watch the trumpeter close his eyes. He is playing notes that seem to hang in the air a fraction of a second longer than they should. He is finding the space between the beats, stretching time and bending melody. The atmosphere is one of relaxed intensity. There is no violence here, no frantic energy of the illegal speakeasies serving bathtub gin. Instead, there is a sense of communal dreaming. You feel the vibration of the floorboards beneath your feet as the music swells. The vipers believe that the smoke allows them to hear the music more clearly, to feel the rhythm in their very bones, and to connect with their fellow players on a telepathic level. But as you sit there, enjoying the warmth of the room and the brilliance of the improvisation, a shadow is beginning to stretch across the country. To understand where this shadow comes from, you must leave the smoky clubs of New Orleans and travel west, toward the dusty plains of Texas and the winding banks of the Rio Grande. You find yourself standing on a high ridge overlooking the border. It is 1910, and the horizon is filled with the smoke of the Mexican Revolution. Thousands of people are fleeing the conflict, seeking safety and a new life in the United States. They carry their belongings in bundles, and they carry their culture in their hearts. Among their traditions is the use of a plant they call marijuana. For centuries, it has been used in Mexico as a folk medicine, a relaxant, and a way to ease the aches of a long day of labor in the fields. Up until this point, the American public knew the plant primarily as cannabis. It was an ingredient in the tinctures and elixirs found in every neighborhood pharmacy. It was something used by doctors to treat migraines or insomnia. But as you watch the immigrants cross the border, you see the linguistic shift beginning to happen. The word marijuana sounds foreign to the American ear. It sounds exotic, and to those who are fearful of the changing face of the country, it sounds dangerous. You move forward in time to 1915. You are in El Paso, Texas. The city is bustling with tension. Local authorities are looking for ways to control the new arrivals, and they find their weapon in the plant. The first city ordinances against the possession of marijuana are passed here. They are not based on scientific studies or public health crises. They are based on a desire for social control. You see the headlines in the local newspapers. They describe the plant as a Mexican crazy weed that causes users to lose their minds and commit acts of unimaginable violence. You know, from your time in the New Orleans tea pads, that this is not true. But the power of a scary story is often greater than the power of the truth. As the 1920s roar on, the narrative begins to spread like a wildfire across the dry grass of the Great Plains. You watch as more states begin to pass their own bans. By 1930, the plant has been outlawed in 16 states. The fear is no longer just about the border. It has been tied to the very music you heard in New Orleans. The authorities look at the jazz clubs and see white women and black men sharing the same space, fueled by the same smoke and the same music. To the establishment of the time, this social blending is a threat to the order of the world. You now find yourself in a quiet, wood-paneled office in Washington, District of Columbia. It is 1930. A man named Harry Anslinger has just been appointed as the first commissioner of the newly formed Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He is a man of intense focus and even more intense ambition. Initially, he does not think much of the plant. He believes it is a minor issue compared to the dangers of opium and cocaine. But he soon realizes that to grow his bureau and secure his funding, he needs a new enemy. He needs a crusade. You watch as Anslinger begins to compile what he calls his gore files. These are folders filled with sensationalist accounts of crimes allegedly committed by people under the influence of marijuana. Most of them are based on hearsay, half-truths, or outright fabrications. You see him sitting at his desk, leafing through reports that link the plant to madness, suicide, and murder. He begins a massive public relations campaign. You see the posters appearing on city walls. They show young people with wild eyes, their lives ruined by a single puff of a cigarette. You see the films like the famous Reefer Madness, which portray the plant as a gateway to total moral collapse. The campaign is effective because it plays on the deep-seated anxieties of the era. The Great Depression has left the country feeling vulnerable and desperate. People are looking for someone to blame for their troubles, and the foreign-sounding marijuana becomes an easy scapegoat. You feel the atmosphere of the country shifting from the experimental freedom of the Jazz Age to a period of rigid suspicion. By 1937, the stage is set for the final act of this first prohibition. You are standing in the gallery of the United States Congress. The air is formal and stuffy. The Marijuana Tax Act is being debated. It is not a direct ban, as that would have been unconstitutional at the time. Instead, it is a piece of legislation that imposes heavy taxes and impossible record-keeping requirements on anyone who grows, sells, or uses the plant. It effectively makes the plant illegal by making it impossible to possess legally. You notice something strange as the session proceeds. There is almost no debate. The American Medical Association sends a representative to protest, arguing that the plant has legitimate medicinal uses and that there is no evidence it causes the violence Anslinger claims. But his testimony is brushed aside. The politicians have already made up their minds. They have listened to the stories, and they have seen the scary posters. The bill passes quickly, and with the stroke of a pen, a plant that had been a part of human history for thousands of years is officially cast into the shadows of the law. You witness the first arrest under the new federal law. It happens in Denver, Colorado. A man named Samuel Caldwell is caught selling 2 cigarettes to an undercover agent. He is sentenced to 4 years of hard labor. The era of the Vipers, the era of the open, creative use of the plant in the jazz halls, is coming to an end. The music will continue, of course, because jazz is too powerful to be stopped. But the culture surrounding it will have to go deeper underground. As you stand there in the cooling twilight of the late 1930s, you see the world changing. The vibrant, smoky rooms are being replaced by hidden corners and whispered secrets. The plant has been redefined. It is no longer a medicine or a musician's muse. In the eyes of the law, it has become a symbol of rebellion, a mark of the outsider, and a tool of the criminal. You feel a sense of quietude as the scene fades. The frantic energy of the propaganda and the heavy thud of the judge's gavel begin to soften. You are back in the present moment, or perhaps you are drifting in that space between then and now. The history of this plant is not a straight line. It is a series of loops and curves, much like the improvisational melodies of a New Orleans trumpet. It is a story of how words can be used to change perceptions, and how fear can be used to rewrite the relationship between humans and the natural world. The night air is still now. The echoes of the brass band have faded into the rustle of the leaves. You can feel the weight of your body against the mattress, the softness of the sheets, and the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing. The past is a long, winding river, and you have traveled down one of its most turbulent stretches. But for now, the water is calm. The stories are tucked away, and the world is shrouded in the peaceful dark of sleep. You have seen the rise of the Jazz Age and the fall of the first legal curtain. You have walked through the smoke and the shadows, and now it is time to let the silence take over. The journey continues tomorrow, but tonight there is only the quiet. You find yourself standing on a street corner in Washington District of Columbia. It is the summer of 1930. The air is thick and heavy, the kind of humidity that clings to your skin and makes the marble monuments look as though they are sweating. You can hear the distant sound of a streetcar clattering along its tracks, a rhythmic, metallic lullaby that echoes through the broad avenues. The city is a mixture of grand ambition and quiet desperation. The Great Depression has settled over the country like a heavy woolen blanket, and the optimism of the previous decade has begun to fade into a gray, dusty reality. You walk toward a somber government building. Your footsteps echo on the stone steps. Inside, the hallways are long and dim, lit by yellowed bulbs that cast long shadows across the linoleum floors. You hear the frantic, steady drumming of typewriters coming from behind heavy oak doors. This is the birthplace of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. You enter an office where the air smells of old parchment, ink, and the faint, lingering scent of a cigar. Behind a large, cluttered desk sits a man named Harry Jacob Anslinger. He is a man of order, a man of rules. He has just been appointed as the first commissioner of this new bureau. You watch him as he leans over a stack of files. His face is set in a mask of determination. He is not a man who enjoys the chaotic fringes of society. He believes in the clarity of the law, and he sees a world that is becoming increasingly blurred. For a moment, you imagine the world through his eyes. Prohibition of alcohol is still the law of the land, but it is failing. The grand experiment is leaking at the seams. People are tired of the violence and the secret speakeasies. Anslinger knows that his new bureau needs a purpose, a focus that will justify its existence in these lean economic times. He looks down at a folder labeled marijuana. At first, he did not think much of this plant. He once said it was not a significant problem. But things are changing. The winds of politics are shifting, and you can feel the tension in the room as he begins to draft a new narrative. You follow him as he moves through the city, attending meetings and speaking with newspaper publishers. You see him shaking hands with William Randolph Hearst, the man who controls a vast empire of ink and paper. Hearst has his own reasons for wanting to see the hemp industry curtailed. He has invested heavily in forests for paper pulp, and the rising potential of industrial hemp as a competitor is a shadow on his ledger. Together, they begin to weave a story. You pick up a newspaper from a nearby stand. The headlines are bold and terrifying. You read words like Assassin of Youth and The Devil's Harvest. The stories describe a world where a single puff of a cigarette can lead to madness, violence, and the total breakdown of moral fiber. You see illustrations of frantic people, their eyes wide with a manufactured insanity. This is yellow journalism at its peak. It is a campaign designed to bypass the intellect and speak directly to the fears of a worried nation. You walk into a small, crowded theater. The lights dim, and a film begins to play. It is called Reefer Madness. You watch as actors portray high school students who are lured into a life of crime and tragedy after trying a forbidden substance. The flickering light of the projector dances across your face. The film is sensational, over the top, and almost absurd, but to an audience already struggling with the uncertainty of the Depression, it is a chilling warning. You feel the collective anxiety in the room. People are looking for something to blame for the perceived decay of society, and Anslinger is providing them with a clear target. As you travel further into this era, you notice how the campaign uses the power of prejudice to fuel its fire. You walk through neighborhoods where jazz music spills out into the street. It is the music of change, of improvisation, and of cultural blending. You hear the bright call of a trumpet and the deep, steady pulse of a double bass. To many, this music represents a new kind of freedom. But in the files of the Bureau of Narcotics, it is documented as a symptom of a larger problem. Anslinger connects the use of marijuana to the musicians in these clubs, and more broadly, to the minority communities where the plant has been used for generations. You see the memos he writes. He uses language that is designed to alienate and frighten. He speaks of the influence of the plant on people of color, suggesting that it gives them a false sense of equality or drives them to act out against the social order. It is a dark chapter of history where the law is used as a tool to reinforce boundaries that are already beginning to fray. You feel a cold chill as you realize how easily a narrative can be constructed when there is no one to challenge the storyteller. You find yourself back in a government hearing room in 1937. The room is quiet, filled with men in dark suits. The air is still. You listen as the Marijuana Tax Act is discussed. It is not an outright ban, but a clever use of the power to tax. By making the tax stamps impossible to obtain, the government can effectively criminalize the plant without needing a constitutional amendment like the one used for alcohol. You see a man stand up to speak. This is Dr. William Woodward, a representative of the American Medical Association. He looks around the room with a sense of confusion. He points out that the medical community was not consulted. He mentions that the plant, which they know as cannabis, has been used in medicines for decades. He argues that there is no scientific evidence to support the claims of extreme violence and madness that have been touted in the newspapers. But his voice is a whisper against a gale. The committee members seem uninterested in his data. They have already seen the headlines. They have already felt the pressure of the public sphere. One of the congressmen even asks the doctor if he is sure he knows what he is talking about, implying that his lack of knowledge of the word marijuana proves he is out of touch. It is a clever trap. By using a name that sounds foreign and unfamiliar, Anslinger has successfully distanced the plant from the familiar tinctures and extracts that doctors have used for years. The act passes with very little debate. You watch as the president signs the document. The stroke of the pen is quiet, almost silent, but its impact will ripple through the decades to come. The era of the Bureau of Narcotics has truly begun. Anslinger has his mandate. He has his budget. And he has a new set of tools to enforce his vision of a disciplined, uniform America. You walk back out into the night. The city is quieter now. The humidity has broken, and a light rain has started to fall, washing the dust from the marble steps. You think about the power of a single man with a focused mission. You think about how easily a plant that had been a part of human history for thousands of years was suddenly cast into the role of a villain. The sound of your footsteps is softened by the rain. You pass a house where a radio is playing softly. A voice is talking about progress and the future. But you know that the shadows in the files of the Bureau of Narcotics are growing longer. The campaign was not just about a substance. It was about control, about the stories we tell ourselves to feel safe, and about the people who are left out of those stories. You keep walking, the rhythm of your pace matching the steady drip of water from the eaves of the buildings. The world is changing, moving away from the ancient traditions of the earth and into a new age of regulation and bureaucracy. The quiet of the night feels different now. It is no longer just the peace of the end of the day. It is the silence of a door being locked, of a chapter being closed, and of a long, complicated history being rewritten one typewriter key at a time. You look up at the dark sky, where the clouds are moving slowly past a pale moon. The stars are hidden, but you know they are there, watching over the shifting tides of human laws and human fears. You take a deep breath of the damp air, feeling the weight of the history you have just witnessed. It is a story of how easily the world can be reshaped by the stroke of a pen and the power of a well-told lie. And as you walk into the darkness, you carry that knowledge with you, a quiet witness to the birth of a new era. The sound of the city fades behind you as you move into the park. The grass is wet and cool. You find a bench and sit down, watching the way the streetlights reflect in the puddles on the pavement. The world is at rest, but the machinery of the state is just beginning to turn. The files are being organized, the agents are being trained, and the narrative is being set in stone. It is a time of transition, a bridge between the old ways and the new, and you are standing right in the middle of it. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the wind in the trees. It sounds like the rustle of 1,000 pages turning at once. It sounds like the collective sigh of a nation trying to find its way in the dark. The story of the plant and the people who use it has taken a sharp turn, and the road ahead is winding and full of shadows. But for now, in this moment of quiet, there is only the rain and the steady, rhythmic beat of your own heart. You think of the farmers who will no longer grow hemp for their rope and their cloth. You think of the doctors who will find their medicine chests restricted. You think of the jazz musicians who will find themselves watched by men in suits. The world is becoming a smaller place, defined by what is allowed and what is forbidden. And Harry Anslinger, sitting in his office with his files and his ink, is the architect of this new landscape. The rain begins to slow, leaving the world shimmering and clean in the dim light. You stand up and continue your walk, feeling the dampness of the air on your face. The night is long and there are many more stories to be told, but this one, the story of the Bureau and its campaign, is one that will echo for a very long time. You move forward, your shadow stretching out before you, as the city sleeps and the history of tomorrow begins to take shape in the quiet halls of power. You realize that the campaign was not just about the plant itself, but about the way society chooses to handle what it does not understand. It was a moment where fear was more powerful than facts, and where the desire for order outweighed the value of tradition. You can almost hear the ghost of the typewriter keys clacking in the wind, a ghostly reminder of the power of words to change the world. The ink may be dry on the Marijuana Tax Act, but the story it started is only just beginning. The moon breaks through the clouds for a brief moment, casting a silver light over the city. You see the dome of the Capitol in the distance, a pale white mountain against the dark sky. It looks solid and immovable, a symbol of the laws that have been made and the power that has been exercised. You take one last look at the quiet streets before turning toward your own rest. The history of the plant has been intertwined with the history of humans since the very beginning, and though this chapter is a difficult one, it is part of the long, winding journey that has brought us to this moment. You feel a sense of peace as you walk, the cool air filling your lungs. The complexities of the past are heavy, but they are also what make the present so rich and varied. As you move toward the end of your walk, you hold on to the images of the night, the sound of the rain, the smell of the old office, and the sight of the man behind the desk. They are all parts of a larger puzzle, a story that is still being written, one night at a time. The world is quiet now, and as you find your way back to your own time and place, you carry the echoes of the 1930s with you, a reminder of the power of the past to shape the future. The street lamps flicker and then settle into a steady glow. The night is deep and full of secrets, but the story of Harry Anslinger and his bureau is now a part of your own understanding. You step out of the bright, white heat of a Mediterranean afternoon and into the cool, shaded corridor of a research institute in Rehovot, Israel. It is 1964. The air inside the building smells of floor wax, old paper, and the faint, ozone tang of scientific equipment. The transition from the buzzing energy of the street to the clinical silence of the laboratory is immediate. You feel the weight of the humid air lift as you walk deeper into the belly of the Weizmann Institute of Science. Your footsteps echo softly against the polished stone floors. You are here to witness a moment of quiet transformation, a point in history where thousands of years of human mystery are about to be distilled into a single, clear molecule. For millennia, as you have seen in your journey through time, humanity has known the effects of the cannabis plant. They have known the heavy eyelids, the eased pain, the sudden bursts of laughter, and the deep restorative sleep. But no one, not the ancient Chinese emperors, nor the Scythian warriors, nor the Victorian doctors, truly knew the name of the ghost in the machine. They knew what it did, but they did not know what it was. In this laboratory, beneath the hum of fluorescent lights, that is about to change. You find yourself standing beside a workbench cluttered with glass. There are round-bottomed flasks, long glass columns packed with white powder, and coiled condensers that look like frozen spirals of water. A young chemist named Raphael Mechoulam moves with a deliberate, steady rhythm. He is not a man of frantic energy, but of deep, persistent patience. To understand the plant, he realized he had to stop looking at it as a botanical specimen and start looking at it as a puzzle of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. You watch as he prepares for an experiment. Earlier that day, he had taken a bus from the police station in Tel Aviv back to the institute. In his bag, he carried 5 kilograms of smuggled Lebanese hashish that the police had seized and handed over to him for his research. It is a strange thought to imagine a scientist sitting on a public bus with a bag full of contraband. The heavy, resinous scent of the earth and the sun clinging to his clothes while commuters around him read newspapers and stared out the windows. But in the pursuit of knowledge, the ordinary and the extraordinary often walk hand in hand. The lab is quiet, save for the rhythmic bubbling of a glass apparatus. You can almost feel the anticipation in the air, a tension that has been building for decades. Other scientists had tried to find the active ingredient before. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, researchers in the United States and the United Kingdom had managed to isolate certain parts of the plant, like cannabidiol, which we now know as CBD. But when they tested it, they found it did not produce the characteristic effects that had defined the plant for centuries. The true secret remained hidden, masked by the complexity of the plant's resin. You lean in closer to the workbench. On a sheet of filter paper, there is a small amount of a thick amber-colored oil. It looks humble, like honey or tree sap, but it represents the culmination of months of meticulous work. Mechoulam and his colleagues, Yehiel Jouni and Haviv Ederi, have used a technique called column chromatography. You can see the glass columns standing like tall sentinels. They are filled with a fine, white substance called silica. By pouring the plant extract into the top and letting it slowly, agonizingly slowly drip through the silica, they can separate the different molecules based on how they interact with the white powder. It is a process of filtration and refinement. You watch the drops fall one by one, Each drop is a fraction of a second in time. Drip, drip, drip. It is the sound of patience. It is the sound of the scientific method. As the liquid moves through the column, the different compounds in the hashish begin to separate into bands. It is as if you are watching a rainbow being pulled apart into its individual colors, but instead of light, it is the very essence of the plant being layered out. One of these fractions, a clear and viscous liquid, is what they have been searching for. They have named it delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC for short. You look at the small vial containing the substance. It is colorless and odorless, yet it contains the power to alter perception, to soothe tremors, and to change the way a human mind perceives the passage of time. For the first time in history, the primary psychoactive component of cannabis has been isolated and identified. The ghost has been given a name, but the discovery in the lab is only half of the story. Science requires proof, and proof requires observation. You follow the researchers out of the lab and into a more domestic setting. To truly know if they have found the right molecule, they must see how it affects the living. You are now in a small apartment, the evening air cooling the room as the sun dips below the horizon. A group of friends has gathered. They are relaxed, sitting on sofas and chairs, unaware that they are about to participate in one of the most famous informal experiments in the history of pharmacology. Meculam's wife, Dahlia, has prepared a cake. It is an ordinary cake, sweet and moist, but into certain slices, the scientists have added a precise dose of the isolated THC. This is the first time the pure molecule is being tested on humans. You watch as the guests eat. For a long time, nothing happens. The conversation flows easily. They talk about their day, about politics, about music. The clock on the wall ticks away the minutes. Then the shift begins. You notice it in the way the light seems to linger a bit longer in the eyes of one woman. She begins to laugh, a deep, genuine sound that starts in her chest and fills the room. She finds something mundane to be incredibly, wonderfully funny. Beside her, another man becomes uncharacteristically quiet. He isn't distressed, but rather deeply contemplative. He looks at his hands as if seeing them for the first time, marveling at the complexity of his own skin. Another guest feels a sudden wave of hunger, reaching for more of the plain cake with a look of intense focus. Another simply feels a profound sense of peace, leaning back into the cushions as the stresses of the week melt away. You are observing the diverse spectrum of the human response to this single molecule. Because the THC was isolated, the scientists could finally confirm that this was indeed the compound responsible for the plant's legendary effects. The experiment was a success. The molecule worked. You return to the quiet of the lab the next morning. The sun is just beginning to touch the tops of the glass beakers. Now that the molecule has been identified, the world of medicine begins to change, though the change is slow and quiet at first. The isolation of THC allows scientists to start asking the next big question. If this tiny molecule can change the way we feel, does that mean our brains are designed to receive it? This thought hangs in the air like the scent of the hashish from the day before. The discovery of THC is the key that will eventually unlock the door to the endocannabinoid system, a vast network of receptors within the human body that helps regulate everything from mood to appetite to pain. But that discovery is still years away. For now, in 1964, there is just the satisfaction of a mystery solved. There is the neatness of the chemical formula written on a chalkboard. There is the clarity of the amber oil in the vial. You stand in the silence of the lab, looking at the tools of the trade. The spatulas, the scales, the notebooks filled with rows of numbers. It is a reminder that history is not just made on battlefields or in the halls of Parliament. It is made in quiet rooms by people who are willing to look closer than anyone else has looked before. It is made by those who are willing to take the messy, complicated world and try to find the simple truths hidden within it. The plant that traveled across the ancient Silk Roads, that was burned in the bronze braziers of nomadic tribes, and that was hidden in the pockets of jazz musicians in New Orleans, has finally been understood on a molecular level. It has been stripped of its folklore and its stigma, if only for a moment, to be viewed as a masterpiece of natural chemistry. You feel a sense of calm in this realization. The world feels a little more explained, a little more orderly. As you prepare to leave the lab, you take one last look at the glass columns. They are empty now, the white silica waiting for the next experiment. The sun is higher in the sky, and the building is starting to wake up. You hear the distant sound of a telephone ringing and the muffled voices of other researchers arriving for work. The moment of discovery has passed, and it has now become part of the steady, ongoing stream of human knowledge. You walk back out into the heat, the memory of the cool, quiet lab staying with you. A reminder of the day the secret of the plant was finally whispered to those who knew how to listen. You find yourself standing on a street corner in Washington District of Columbia. It is the summer of 1970. The air is thick and heavy, the kind of humid heat that clings to your skin like a damp wool blanket. The city feels different than the labs and the ancient hills you visited before. There is a sense of nervous energy in the air, a vibration of change that is less about discovery and more about control. You watch as the evening sun dips below the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the marble monuments. The streetlights flicker to life with a buzzing sound, humming a low, electric tune that seems to signal the beginning of a new chapter. You walk toward a small storefront where a television is visible through the glass. The black and white image on the screen is grainy, but you recognize the face of President Richard Nixon. He speaks with a stern gravity, his voice muffled by the glass but his intentions clear. This is the moment when the narrative of the plant shifts dramatically. It is no longer just a substance being studied by scientists or enjoyed by musicians in smoky clubs. It is being redefined as a primary enemy of the state. You feel the weight of this shift in the air. The era of the war on drugs is beginning, and the shadows are growing longer. You turn away from the window and continue down the sidewalk. Your footsteps echo against the concrete. In 1970, the United States Congress passed the Controlled Substances Act. This was the moment the plant was placed into Schedule 1. You understand what that means as you walk. It is a legal classification that declares a substance has no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. For the plant that has been used by healers for thousands of years, this is a profound and total silencing. You feel the irony of it, thinking back to the quiet labs and the ancient scrolls. The law has moved faster than the science, and the door is being locked. As you walk, you notice a police cruiser gliding slowly past you. Its tires make a soft, rhythmic slapping sound against the pavement. The red and blue lights are not flashing, but their presence is felt. The atmosphere of the city is becoming one of surveillance. The Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act has given the government new tools and new powers. You see the change in the eyes of the people you pass. There is a new kind of looking over the shoulder, a new way of tucking things into pockets. The plant is being pushed deeper into the shadows, and those who associate with it are being pushed there too. You find yourself sitting on a park bench, watching the fireflies dance in the grass. It is 1972 now, You imagine the members of the Schaefer Commission sitting in a room not far from here. This commission was appointed by the president himself to study the effects of the plant and recommend a path forward. You can almost hear the rustle of their papers. Their conclusion was surprising to many. They recommended the decriminalization of the plant for personal use, noting that its effects were not the existential threat many claimed them to be. But as you sit there in the cooling night air, you realize that their report is being ignored. The political momentum has already moved in the opposite direction. The narrative of fear has proven more powerful than the data on the page. The years begin to blur as you walk through the decade. You feel the shift from the 70s into the 80s. The air seems to grow colder, sharper. The conversational tone of the earlier years is replaced by a more aggressive rhetoric. You are now standing in a suburban neighborhood in the mid-1980s. The streetlights here are brighter, harsher, casting a sterile white glow over the manicured lawns. You see a billboard in the distance with a simple message: just say no. This is the era of Nancy Reagan and a renewed fervor in the battle against substances. You walk past a house where the blue light of a television flickers in the living room window. News reports talk about mandatory minimum sentences and the expansion of the prison system. The war on drugs has become a literal war in many communities. You feel the tension in the air, a sense of division. The plant has become a symbol for a much larger struggle over culture, race, and the role of the government in the lives of individuals. The immersive quiet of the ancient world feels like a dream compared to the loud, clashing reality of this era. You find yourself walking through a different kind of neighborhood now. The buildings are taller, the streets narrower and less well lit. You hear the distant sound of a siren, a lonely, wailing cry that echoes between the brick walls. In this part of the city, the impact of the laws you saw being signed is visible on every corner. The enforcement of these rules is not equal. You see the way the shadows hide some things while exposing others. The social cost of the conflict is etched into the cracked sidewalks and the boarded-up windows. The plant, once a part of the natural world, is now a catalyst for a deep social fracture. You stop at a small corner deli. The smell of old paper and cold sodas greets you as you step inside. On the counter, a newspaper headline screams about a new crackdown. You realize that during this time, the number of people incarcerated for non-violent offenses related to the plant is skyrocketing. The infrastructure of the war is being built in real time. New agencies are formed, new technologies for detection are developed, and a new language of prohibition is mastered. You feel a sense of heaviness in your chest, a recognition of how much has changed in such a short span of history. You walk back out into the night. The moon is a thin sliver in the sky, barely providing any light at all. You think about the people who stayed in the shadows during these years. The underground culture did not disappear. It simply became more resilient and more hidden. You imagine the whispered conversations in darkened apartments, the secret gardens hidden behind false walls, and the complex networks of trust that formed when the law became an adversary. This was a time of secrets. To know the plant was to live a double life. As you navigate the quiet streets, you reflect on the transition of the plant from a botanical specimen to a political weapon. You see how it was used to define who belonged and who did not, who was a citizen and who was a criminal. The shadows of the war on drugs are not just about the plant itself, but about the people caught in the crossfire. You feel the ghosts of those years around you, the lost opportunities for research, the families separated by long sentences, and the lingering fear that permeated the culture. The night is deep now, and the city is mostly silent. The buzzing of the streetlights is the only constant sound. You realize that the story of this era is one of a long, dark tunnel. For decades, the official stance was one of absolute opposition. The plant was locked away, both physically in evidence rooms and metaphorically in the public mind. But even in the deepest shadows, things are never entirely still. Even during the height of the crackdowns, there were those who continued to ask questions, who continued to believe that the plant had secrets yet to be shared. You walk toward a bridge that spans a quiet river. The water below is dark and smooth, reflecting the few lights that remain on. You lean against the cold stone railing and look out over the city. The shadows of the war on drugs are still visible, stretched long across the landscape of the present. They have shaped the world you live in now in ways that are often invisible. The laws, the perceptions, and the scars of that conflict remain part of the foundation of the modern world. You feel a slight breeze pick up, carrying the scent of rain. The era of the midnight shadows is a heavy one to carry, a reminder of how quickly the relationship between humans and the natural world can be redefined by power and fear. You stand there for a long time, watching the dark water flow beneath the bridge, thinking about the resilience of the plant and the people who never stopped looking for the light in the darkness. The silence of the night is profound, a space between the loud declarations of the past and the uncertain whispers of the future. You turn away from the water and begin to walk again, your footsteps light on the pavement, moving toward the edge of the shadow where the first hints of a new dawn might eventually appear. The air feels thinner now, less burdened by the weight of the rhetoric, as if the night itself is preparing to exhale. You carry the memory of the blue lights and the hushed streets with you, a witness to a time when the world tried to turn its back on a piece of its own history. The city sleeps around you, unaware of the journey you have taken through its troubled past, while the plant remains, waiting in the earth, waiting for the shadows to finally recede. The air feels different as you step out from the long shadows of the mid-20th century. The cold, sharp wind of prohibition that once rattled the windows of jazz clubs and basement apartments has begun to soften into something more temperate. You find yourself walking down a street in San Francisco in the middle of the 1990s. It is a morning filled with that iconic, rolling fog that muffles the sound of the cable cars and the distant cry of gulls near the bay. But beneath the damp chill, there is a new warmth growing. It is not the heat of a fire or a conflict, but the steady, quiet hum of a community finding its voice after a very long silence. You stop in front of a modest storefront. In the years prior, this place might have been hidden, its windows blacked out or its entrance tucked away in an alleyway. But today there is a sign in the window. It is small, perhaps even a bit tentative, but it is there. You see a green cross, a symbol that is beginning to take on a new meaning across the landscape of the West Coast. You reach for the handle of the door, and as you pull it open, a small brass bell chimed above you. The sound is clear and bright, announcing your arrival not to a place of ill repute, but to a sanctuary. As you step inside, the first thing you notice is the scent. It is not the heavy, skunky odor that lingered in the air of a crowded concert or the stale smell of smoke in a poorly ventilated room. Instead, it is the smell of a botanical garden. It is the scent of dried lavender, of pungent pine needles, and the deep, earthy aroma of cured vegetation. The air is clean and still. The room is flooded with natural light from a skylight above, casting long rectangles of gold across a polished wooden floor. This is the beginning of the medical movement, and the atmosphere is deliberately clinical yet undeniably human. You walk toward a counter made of reclaimed oak. Behind it, There are rows of glass jars, each one labeled with handwritten script. You see names that sound like poetry and names that sound like science. There are people standing near you, and you take a moment to look at them. They are not the caricatures that the films of the previous decades tried to project. To your left, there is an elderly woman with silver hair tucked into a neat bun. She holds a cane in one hand and a small slip of paper in the other. She is talking to the person behind the counter about her arthritis, about the way the damp weather makes her joints ache, and how she just wants to be able to knit for her grandchildren again. To your right, a man in a quiet suit, perhaps a teacher or an accountant, waits patiently, his eyes tired from a long week. There is a profound sense of relief in this room. It is the relief of being seen. For decades, these people had to navigate the world of shadows to find the relief they sought. They had to deal with whispers and locked doors. But here, in this quiet square of the city, the secret is out in the open. You feel the weight of that history lifting, the heavy cloak of shame being set aside in favor of a conversation about health, wellness, and the simple right to exist without fear. As you leave the shop and continue your walk, the years begin to move faster around you. The 1990s melt into the early 2000s. You see the green crosses multiplying. They appear in Los Angeles, in Oakland, and eventually, they start to sprout in the mountain towns of Colorado and the rainy streets of Portland. The public square is changing. You notice that the conversations on the evening news are shifting. The frantic tone of the past is being replaced by a more measured, curious dialogue. You see scientists in white coats appearing on television screens, holding up diagrams of the human nervous system, pointing to receptors that seem designed specifically to interact with the molecules of this ancient plant. It is as if the world is rediscovering a piece of its own biology that had been forgotten or suppressed. You find yourself now in a different city, perhaps Denver, in the year 2012. The atmosphere is electric. It is election night, and you are standing in a public park where people have gathered to hear the results of a landmark vote. There is a sense of anticipation that feels like the moment before a heavy summer rain breaks. When the news finally comes, it is not a whisper but a roar. The barriers are falling. The distinction between the medicinal and the personal is blurring, and a new era of legal regulation is beginning. You walk through the streets the following morning, and you notice how the physical world reflects this change. The aesthetics of the plant are being reimagined. You pass a boutique that looks like it belongs in a high-end shopping district. The windows are large and clear, showing off an interior that looks more like a jewelry store than a pharmacy. There are no more blacked-out windows. There are no more neon signs of a certain leaf. Instead, there is minimalism. There is marble and brass. There is the scent of expensive candles and the sound of soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. You enter one of these modern spaces. The experience is curated. A person walks up to you not to sell you something in a hurry, but to guide you. They speak of terpenes and flavonoids. They talk about the history of the soil where the plant was grown and the specific light cycles used to coax the flowers into bloom. You realize that the plant has been brought back into the light of day, and in doing so, it has been transformed into a product of craftsmanship. You look at the packaging on the shelves. It is beautiful. There are sleek tins embossed with silver foil, glass drippers that look like they belong on a vanity, and small, artisanal boxes that contain chocolates infused with the essence of the herb. But as you stand in this temple of modern commerce, you also feel a sense of nostalgia. You remember the stories of the ancient travelers on the Silk Road, the doctors in Victorian England, and the musicians in the jazz clubs of New Orleans. You realize that while the packaging has changed, the relationship remains the same. It is a relationship between a person and a plant that has traveled across oceans and through centuries to be here. The public square has finally made room for it again, but the plant itself has not changed. It is still the same hardy, resilient weed that grew on the edges of the Himalayan plateaus. It still carries the same complex chemistry that has baffled and delighted humans for 5,000 years. You step back outside and the sun is high in the sky. The city is busy, moving with the frantic energy of the 21st century. Cars hum by, people stare into their glowing screens, and the world feels faster than it ever has before. But as you walk, you notice the subtle ways the plant has integrated back into the fabric of daily life. You see a billboard for a topical cream meant to soothe sore muscles after a workout. You see a magazine in a bookstore window with a cover story about the future of sustainable hemp textiles. You see people sitting on a park bench, sharing a quiet moment, the smoke drifting up and vanishing into the blue sky without anyone turning their head in judgment. The return to the public square has been a gentle one in the end. It was not a sudden explosion, but a slow thawing of a long, cultural winter. You feel a sense of peace as you reach the end of your journey. The shadows have receded, and the plant is no longer a ghost or a secret. It is a part of the landscape, as common as the trees that line the boulevard or the flowers in the window boxes. You take a deep breath of the afternoon air, feeling the connection between the past and the present, and the long, winding road that has led back to this simple, quiet acceptance. The journey through the history of the plant is nearly complete, and as the sun begins to set, casting a long, amber glow over the city, you feel the weight of the day falling away, leaving only the calm, steady rhythm of the world turning on its axis, moving forward into a future where the old ways and the new ways have finally found a way to live side by side.